Weeknights at 6 on UPN 38.
This is an image no one will forget. A second airliner slamming right into the World Trade Center this morning. Millions of people watched it happen on TV. Both of the Twin Towers have now collapsed. At about 10 this morning, a plane crashed near the Pentagon. The nation's capital is now on high alert, and all government buildings have been evacuated. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Liz Walker. As you can imagine, there is pandemonium and chaos in the streets of New York. We're going to have Team 4 coverage on this changing situation. Let's begin now with WBZ's national correspondent, Alina Sergani, who's standing by in Washington, D.C.
The nation remains on high alert. In New York City, the fear is that the death toll could reach the thousands. Here in Washington, the nation's capital is virtually shut down, and there remains a sense of chaos as everyone tries to get out of town. Smoke and fire continue billowing from the Pentagon hours after a plane crashed into the building. A portion of the Pentagon has collapsed, and there are reports of injuries. Witnesses say it looked like a huge orange fireball.
Huge explosion, and then utter pandemonium, as you might imagine. I mean, everybody was screaming, "Oh my God." People started saying, "We've got to turn around." They hit the Pentagon.
Much of downtown Washington is in quiet chaos as people scramble to get out of town. Upon word of the news, President Bush returned to Washington.
And have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
And my colleague Gretchen Carlson is covering the very latest from New York City. Here now is her report.
Both 110-story towers of New York's World Trade Center collapsed after unknown terrorists attacked the buildings this morning. Two aircraft, about 18 minutes apart, flew directly into the towers just as workers were arriving around 9 a.m. The second attack was captured on videotape, showing a large plane smashing into one of the 110-story skyscrapers. The building burst into flames, dropping debris all over the narrow streets of Lower Manhattan. Many people are dead. Hundreds are believed to be critically wounded. 50,000 people work in the World Trade Center.
I looked up and I saw the second plane hit. Had to be a commercial-sized airliner.
What went through your mind?
That it couldn't be real.
A short time later, when top portions of one of the towers collapsed, people on the ground were sent running for their lives.
Let's get out of here.
Officials stopped all flights across the nation. Both planes are believed to have been hijacked. All bridges and tunnels in New York have been closed, while security forces across the nation have been put on the highest alert.
And once again, the fear is that the death toll in New York could reach the thousands. In the meantime, to recap again, here in the nation's capital is virtually shut down. All federal buildings have been closed, most evacuated. Schools are closed. All monuments and museums have also been shut down. In the meantime, the president, who was visiting Florida today, is somewhere on Air Force One, but we are not being told because of that state of emergency plan for days just like today. When we learn more, we'll be sure to keep you updated. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Alina Sergani from Washington, D.C. The FAA has shut down air travel across the nation. Now, here's the latest on the 4 passenger planes that have apparently were targeted by the terrorists. 2 American Airlines planes crashed into the World Trade Center. American Flight 77 was going from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles. American Flight 11 originated here in Boston. It was on its way to Los Angeles. We're told that also from Boston, United Flight 175 heading to Los Angeles is missing. We'll have to update you on that situation. Now, a 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, from Newark to San Francisco crashed outside of Pittsburgh. Let's go right now to WBZ's Casey Kaufman, who's standing by live at Logan, where the airport is closed. Casey?
All right, Liz, we just had a press briefing here. Joseph Lawless, who is from Massport, the Director of Public Safety, just held the press briefing a few moments ago, and he announced the following actions: that Logan has been closed indefinitely by Massport, that the airport was closed this morning at around 9:15. It will remain closed indefinitely, as well as several adjacent construction sites that are near the airport. They were closed down immediately. All passengers have been removed from from so-called secure areas, and they have been relocated within the airport away from the secure areas. They have brought in additional police. They have beefed up the MBTA and shuttle service to get people out of the airport, and they have established probably the most important thing is a family assistance area at the Hilton Hotel, and that's for family members of passengers who were on the flight this morning bound to Los Angeles from Boston, the American Airlines Flight 11, that Lawless would not confirm any reports that that flight was involved. He just said that media accounts have talked about it. He speculated that up to 200 people could be on that flight. That's the capacity, although we're hearing numbers are much lower than that, that was one of the flights involved in this morning's explosion at the World Trade Center in New York. Now, we are hearing that Massport is in close communications with the FAA and the FBI, as well as federal and state agencies. They are going to be relocating this this area, media center, to another hotel nearby. And there were a couple of numbers that Joseph Lawless also asked people, if you can get a pen, I can give them to you. If you have any friends or family members on the American Airlines, you're asked to call 800-245-0999, and the Massport number for information is 617-568-3100. The family assistance area has already been set up. There are counselors and trained professionals there. We understand there already are family members there as well, and obviously we're going to be following this story, Liz.
Okay, Casey, thank you very much. Now, obviously, this situation is still happening as we speak to you. We do have some information from American Airlines, though. They confirmed that they lost 2 aircraft, and they say that Flight 11, the Boeing 767, en route from Boston to Los Angeles, had 81 passengers, and Flight 77, that's the other plane, which was en route from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles, had 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. So that's the number we have from American Airlines. Of course, at the World Trade Center, the high-rise is there. On any given day, 50,000 people work there. On any given day, 150,000 people are in and out of those towers. So, of course, the fatalities there we expect to be high. We're still working on getting that information. We're going to go right now, if you can tell me who we're going to go to right now. Robin Hamilton, who's standing by because the city of Boston is certainly in a state of emergency like cities all over the country. Robin is in the Back Bay. Robin?
Good afternoon, Liz. Well, it is definitely very tense around here. We are right by the Prudential Center and the Hancock buildings, and because they are 2 of the most prominent buildings in the city, there's definitely some concern that they could have been a target. For that reason, there were several evacuations that were issued. One was voluntary from the Prudential Center. The other was mandatory from the Hancock. Now, there has been a police presence up and down the road. They are trying to get people to just stay calm, but of course, we talked to some people earlier this morning, and there's no question that the mood is extremely tense.
Haze everywhere. It's very, very difficult to see, but there has been the whole area has been running from the scene of this new explosion. You can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with. Obviously, we are in the middle of the story.
Okay, now I do want to mention that as far as the Hancock is considered, they did order a mandatory evacuation. All 12,000 employees were evacuated from the 6 buildings. They ordered everyone to go home. Again, for the Prudential Center, it was a voluntary evacuation. There were some people who did remain in the building, but for the most part, most people left. As far as police, they say they are simply standing by. Security has been extremely tight-lipped, partially because I think they don't want to let people know exactly what they're doing, but I also think they want to make sure that people do not panic. They want to make sure that people just stay as calm as possible. But again, there's no question that right now the mood here is extremely tense. Back to you, Liz.
Hey, Robin, thank you very much. Of course, that was a very good point. Boston officials are asking people to remain calm. They're encouraging that and just be aware of the security around the Boston area. Right now, we're going to check in with Joe Shortsleeve, who has some late information for us from the newsroom. Joe?
Liz, obviously a terribly sad day here in Boston, New England, around the country, around the globe. I've just been handed an update here in the newsroom. Apparently, CBS has now identified the pilot of American Airlines Flight 11. His name is John Oganowski. His wife's name is Peggy, and they are from Dracut. Now, let me take you to the American Airlines website this morning and tell you what they're reporting here. American Airlines confirmed today that it lost 2 aircraft in tragic incidents this morning. American said the flights were Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to Los Angeles, 81 passengers and 9 crew members on board. Also, Flight 77, an American Airlines flight, a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles with 58 passengers on board, 4 flight attendants and 2 pilots also on that flight. But because of the heightened security due to obviously what's going on here and the nature of today's events, American Airlines says that it won't release any more information at this time. As you can imagine, the phone lines are completely overwhelmed. Liz, another big news story, of course, that was taking shape today before all these tragic events in New York and around the country was the election to fill Congressman Joe Moakley's seat. The special primary was scheduled to be held today, and right now the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, is considering whether or not to suspend that primary. Now, in other words, what would happen is if you had voted in the primary, your vote would still count, but that the primary would be picked up on some date in the future. Obviously, people are not leaving their homes today to go out and vote, and the Secretary of State's very well aware of this. So no decision has been finalized on the election to fill Joe Moakley's seat, but the Secretary of State is considering at this point suspending the primary at this point. Now, Massachusetts court buildings are closed. Also, the Boston Stock Exchange is closed. The federal buildings are closed. There is a plea going out to people in New England and Boston to donate blood if they possibly can. They would like to ship this blood to New York to help the innumerable number of victims in New York. They are encouraging people here in New England and Boston, if at all possible, to donate blood. Obviously, the need is great at this hour. In addition to the American Airlines Flight 11, which was en route to the West Coast this morning, which we're told hit one of the towers, we're also, of course, learning, like you're learning as well, that there was also a United Airlines flight out of Boston this morning, Flight 175, that also hit perhaps the other tower. One other piece of information, obviously, in the newsroom, we're getting all kinds of phone calls today. We have heard from the employees of TJX, which is a large company located out in Framingham. They are the owners of TJ Maxx and Marshalls. We're told that the CEO of that company brought together employees in the building this morning to tell them that as many as 7 of their employees were on Flight 11, American Airlines Flight 11 to the West Coast this morning. Liz, we will continue to gather a lot more information here in the newsroom, and as soon as I have something more to bring to you, I will. Back to you, Liz.
Okay, Joe, we'll be checking back with you later. The Boston Stock Exchange tells us that the Stock Exchange SEC and the government regulators met this morning to decide to close the exchanges today. The situation is that people are trying to be calm, but everybody is on alert. The city of Boston is, and the rest of the country is. Non-essential state employees have been sent home, as Joe told you. Acting Governor Jane Swift has moved her operations out to Mima's Bunker in Framingham, and that is where WBZ's Josh Benzwanger is right now. Josh?
Thank you, Liz. That's correct. The governor arrived here shortly after 11:30 this morning and instantly set into high-level meetings. The State Emergency Operations Center was activated at that time. At this particular hour, Acting Governor Swift is in meetings with members of the National Guard, state police, and other offices around the state. Apparently, a level 2 alert has been issued for the state of Massachusetts. The highest, of course, is a level 4. They're just taking every precaution necessary. As you mentioned just a few moments ago, all non-essential state employees have either been sent home or asked to remain at home for the remainder of the day. Now, no advisories have been issued at this particular time. The governor and her staff are asking people to simply remain calm. As one spokesman here told us earlier this morning, we have no reason to believe that this will filter over here to Massachusetts. We're going to take every precaution necessary to ensure that the state is safe. We are expecting to hear from the governor in about 10 minutes from now. She'll be making a a statement and answering some questions from the press, and we'll bring that to you live when that happens. Liz?
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to show you some pictures from Washington, D.C. of the Pentagon that was burning earlier today, if we have those pictures. And I'm going to bring in Andrew Winter, who is our terrorist expert, because the first question that I thought of when we heard this incredible, unbelievable story that the Pentagon had been attacked is that it would have been protected. Andrew, why would it be such an easy target?
Well, one of the things is that National Airport there in Washington is located about a mile from the Pentagon, and almost every flight that comes in there almost literally flies right over the Pentagon. So all someone has to do is take a very short right turn, and you're at the Pentagon. So there will be literally no warning whatsoever.
Unbelievable. So this situation, so that's right in the city or in the district where everything is happening.
It's just across the river on the Virginia side of the Potomac River, and that's where National Airport is located, literally about a mile downriver.
How does this country now respond to something like this? What do we do?
Well, there's three things. You care for the victims. The second thing they're trying to do is to make sure that nothing further happens, that there's no more attacks planned, to try to prevent those, and then you try to figure out who did it. And once you do, then you run into the real difficult parts. If this is a state, if this is Iraq, then your response may be a little more set and easy because you know who to hit back at. If this is Osama bin Laden and a diverse, dispersed group of terrorists, where do you strike back at? And it's tremendously difficult.
So we have short-term goals, and then we have the harder, which is the long-term goals.
Right.
But we don't expect any kind of action like planes taking off this afternoon because we just...
Not unless we got incredibly lucky in figuring out and being absolutely certain that we knew who did it and then where to find them.
Okay, thanks a lot. Andrew Winter will be checking back with you throughout this afternoon. We're going to check back now with Robin Hamilton, who is out in the Back Bay area, the city of Boston, under extreme alert. Robin, what's the latest?
Well, basically, again, I think police are just telling everybody to stay calm and not panic. But we have seen a few more people continue to trickle out of the Prudential Center. They ordered a voluntary evacuation sometime after 9 o'clock this morning. It was a similar situation at the Hancock building. However, that was a mandatory evacuation. They ordered all 12,000 people to be evacuated from all 6 buildings. Again, all 12,000 people were evacuated from the 6 buildings from the Hancock building. We had a chance to speak with some people earlier this morning, and the mood is extremely tense. Hundreds of employees made a mass exit from the Prudential Center minutes after the Twin Tower and Pentagon disasters.
I never thought until they talked about the Pentagon that we were in danger of, kind of national problem. So just thought it was a local New York thing, and now we kind of realize it's a scary national thing again.
Just working in a big high-rise like this, I just can't imagine. I just wonder what's going on.
The property manager of the Prudential Center issued a voluntary evacuation shortly after 9 o'clock, but most employees felt they had no other choice but to leave.
Then we got confirmation on the radio, and we took it extremely seriously because we're hanging off the Prudential, and so we called everybody off of the building because we know it was a life-threatening situation.
Now, coming back out here live, there still is a little bit of activity here around the Prudential Center. But again, most people have been leaving, and most people have been ordered to evacuate from other surrounding buildings. There continues to be a police presence right now. They say they are strictly on standby to make sure things stay calm, and they're hopefully trying to keep everyone at ease. But right now, that is a very difficult task at hand. Back to you, Liz.
Okay, Robin, thank you. President Bush was in Florida this morning when these attacks began. He spoke briefly to the crowd, and then he left Florida. Now, the White House, of course, is not releasing any information about where he is heading. Let's listen to what he said earlier this morning, right after the New York attack.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America.
Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat offered his condolences to the American people.
I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked. Completely shocked.
Now, this is not the first time, of course, that New York's World Trade Center has been attacked. Back in 1993, terrorists targeted the World Trade Center. It was Friday, February 26, 1993. The time, 12:18 p.m. The complex was rocked by a bomb blast. 6 people died. Over 1,000 were injured.
It sounded like a bomb, then it sounded like something was falling, but it felt like an earthquake.
The ceiling is entirely collapsed. They are looking for people who might be trapped down there. There were several people hurt. We don't know how seriously.
As smoke billowed, people stumbled from the massive tower, gasping for air, faces covered with soot. Nearly 30 people were rescued by helicopter. Others broke windows on the upper floors for a breath of air. And as the injured were helped out of the building, the enormity of the blast became horrifying.
All the floors were pancake collapsed down. It was a heavy smoke condition on the bottom floor. Fire department was working with the fire.
You have a tough time getting in there?
It was tough. We had to have lights. We had to wear the mask most of the time.
It was a massive terrorist car bomb that not only shattered lives, but also caused more than $300 million in damages. Eventually, a number of militant Muslims were convicted of the attack. And certainly because the World Trade Center towers were targeted before, that is why speculation runs high that they were targeted again, this time by the same people. Senator Edward Kennedy just spoke as responding to this situation in the country. We have a soundbite we want you to hear right now.
Hey, good morning. All of us deplore the acts of terrorism that we have seen in these past minutes, and our hearts reach out to all of those who have suffered, lost their lives, and are injured right now, and all of us reach out as Americans to the brave rescue workers that are attempting to help our fellow citizens. We out of respect for those efforts, have postponed our hearing this morning. We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in other area of public policy. We're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country, and because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments. And we will look forward to an early reappearance by the First Lady for this committee on the subject of early education. And Mrs. Bush, we recognize now.
You heard from the President this morning, and Senator Kennedy and Senator Gregg and I both join his statement in saying that our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now.
First Lady Laura Bush and Senator Ted Kennedy speaking about the tragedy this morning, and also speaking about education, which the First Lady was supposed to have a news conference about. Clearly that was changed, but offering their condolences to the thousands of victims of this terrorist attack. Let's go now to Joe Shortsleeve in the newsroom, who has the latest local information. Joe?
Liz, if we could, I'd like to just run through the very latest on the airlines involved in the crashes this morning. We just received, Associated Press is now reporting exactly which airlines were involved. First of all, it was American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to Los Angeles. That was one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. The plane was carrying 81 passengers and 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. The other American Airlines flight is 77. It is a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles near Washington to Los Angeles. It crashed into the World Trade Center. The plane was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. The next airline involved is United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 crashed southeast of Pittsburgh while en route from Newark to San Francisco. The plane was carrying 38 passengers, 2 pilots, and 5 flight attendants. And the final flight involved here is United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767. The flight was bound from Boston to Los Angeles. It was carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots, 7 flight attendants. The airline would not say where that United Airlines Flight 175 crashed. I'd also like to pass along to you that CBS is now reporting the name of the pilot who was on board the American Airlines Flight 11 this morning. His name is John Oganowski. He is from Dracut. Apparently, they have heard from his wife, Peggy. In addition to that, Amtrak has now suspended service up and down the Northeast Corridor. I'm also being told that tolls on the Mass Pike are free at this hour. To get the very latest on the traffic situation, let's go to Rich Kirkland. Rich, what do you have there?
All right, Joe, thanks very much. We have very busy traffic in downtown Boston. We have live pictures that show a bumper-to-bumper situation on the Central Artery southbound all the way from Somerville right down to Dorchester. Now, some of this heavy traffic we're looking at now on 93 southbound is because of an accident that occurred, a small one, outside South Station Tunnel. But there's noticeably more traffic in downtown Boston streets on roads like the Turnpike and also Soldiers Field Road. Also, where the parking garages are emptying out, Joe, primarily in Cambridge at the Alewife T Station. Very heavy traffic on Route 2 in Cambridge around the Alewife T Station because that parking lot is emptying out very quickly and swamping the road nearby. I talked with one commuter, Joe, a short time ago on Route 128 southbound. He said, like an afternoon rush, Rich, I'm doing about 22 miles an hour southbound in Needham on Route 128 southbound. Also have some details of some slowdowns on 495 as well. But downtown, it's busy, much like an afternoon ride home. Joe, back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Now, I'm just being told here in the newsroom with regards to the election in the 9th District, the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, will be going before the State Supreme Court at 12:45, just about 18 minutes from now, to ask that they suspend the primary in the race to replace Joe Moakley. So Bill Galvin will ask that they suspend the election for today. If you already voted, we're told that your vote will count and that the primary will be rescheduled. Obviously, people are not heading out to vote on such a sad day. Let's go back to you, Liz, in the newsroom.
Okay. Of course, we told you that. Thank you, Joe. Acting Governor Jane Swift is at MEMA's bunker in Framingham. Let's check back in with Josh Binswanger there. Josh?
Thank you, Liz. That's right. We're awaiting the arrival of Acting Governor Jane Swift any moment now. She's due within the next minute or so. She's been meeting with various heads of state agencies to plan out what action, if any, is going to be taken by the state of Massachusetts in the wake of these tragic attacks today, both in New York City and in Washington, D.C. Now, again, all non-essential personnel for the state have been asked to stay home, or if they came to work, have been sent home. At this point in time, no other advisories have been issued. The main thing is for everyone to remain calm. There is no expectation that any of this will filter over into the state of Massachusetts. The governor, the attorney general, and others want to ensure the people of this Commonwealth that everything is running as usual, but every precaution is going to be taken to ensure that things run smoothly. Once again, we are here in the MEMA bunker, which was first conceived by the Kennedy administration during the Cold War, and there was a plan for each state to have a facility to continue to run their state government during or following any sort of nuclear attack. Now, in the past, this agency has run weather problems in terms of snowstorms, hurricanes, and the like, but for the first time, we may be seeing it employed for its original intention. Again, we are waiting momentarily for the governor to arrive here. She will be telling us what plans the state has. A level 2 state of emergency has been declared. The highest level, of course, is a level 4, and we will see if any other steps will be taken. Obviously, roadways are somewhat cramped, and we will wait to hear from her in just a few minutes. Liz, back to you.
Okay, Josh, thank you very much. Of course, WBZ and CBS and UPN 38, of course, have a team of reporters covering this story. We're going to continue to bring you the very latest on this day that we will never forget, the day that America was under terrorist attack. 2 airlines crashed into the World Trade Center, a site that we couldn't believe would happen. Both towers collapsed. Not too long after that, a crash or an attack or an explosion at the Pentagon, a place we never thought could be penetrated. It is a day we won't forget. We want you to stay tuned. CBS WBZ TV, UPN 38 are all covering this story as it develops. We'll check back with you later.
One here knows yet. It will be a long time before that evidence is clear. I will tell you, Dan, no one to our knowledge has thus far claimed credit for this attack, and the FBI is pretty much got this thing under wraps. They're simply not saying anything right now. It will be a long time before that evidence is clear. I will tell you, Dan, no one to our knowledge has thus far claimed credit for this attack, and the FBI is pretty much got this thing under wraps. They're simply not saying anything right now. In fact, if you call the FBI, you can't reach them. They have all gone to their strategic command center inside the building, and this city is locked tight while it decides how to put the government back into place. Dan?
As you see this picture live in New York, in the middle right-hand corner of your screen, the Statue of Liberty. Lady Liberty overlooking the worst attack on the mainland United States in the history of the country. In the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, a direct attack on the freedom of every American and the freedom of every freedom-loving person anywhere. That is not too strong a statement. At least three hijacked planes crashed into U.S. landmarks today, destroying both of New York's Twin Towers, the World Trade Centers, 110 stories up. They were each just beyond the Empire State Building, which is dominating your screen at the moment with the smoke from the collapsed Twin Towers, both towers down now. The Pentagon was plunged into flames in an unprecedented assault on the key symbols of U.S. military and financial power. This videotape of the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings. The loss of life is expected to be catastrophic. There's no other word to describe the expectation of the loss of life from the collapse of the giant towers, where some 50,000 people work, and that says nothing of the people who work around those buildings. 50,000 people on the average day work in the buildings, and in the immediate vicinity, many more thousands work around it. The two 110-story buildings collapsed one at a time in a huge cloud of smoke and fire about 2 hours after the initial impacts. Those of you who have been with us know this, those who joining may not. First, one airplane hit one tower, then incredibly, inconceivably, almost unbelievably, another airplane hit the other tower. President Bush has called the deliberate aerial assaults, quote, an apparent terrorist attack. He has, of course, ordered full-scale investigation. The president, last report, was flying from Florida, where he was on a visit, back to an unknown destination. There certainly is a school of thought in Washington that runs he should return immediately to the White House, the symbol of stability and all that we hold dear, and walk right into the White House and take command there. Another school of thought is, well, that might not be such a good idea. We'll see where he goes. In the meantime, Vice President Dick Cheney is in charge at the White House in the Situation Room. New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said there has been, quote, a horrendous number of lives lost in the assault on this city. These are the worst attacks on the U.S. mainland in modern history. You'd have to go back to the Civil War for anything approaching it. That's not too strong a statement. Certainly this is not on the order of the Civil War, but for an attack on the American mainland, not in the 20th century, nor in the early stages of this, the 21st century, has been an attack such as this. And I'm going from memory here, but Abraham Lincoln once said, speaking of how America had never been invaded, that said Lincoln, one cannot imagine the footprints of an enemy in the Appalachians or an enemy drinking from the Ohio. But what we have seen and heard today in these horrifying scenes come as close to that as we've ever had in this country. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and gunmen at refugee camps in Lebanon are reported to have fired in the air to celebrate news of the attacks. Hospitals here in New York are overwhelmed with patients as that massive cloud bellows into the skies, but also the smoke can clearly be smelled in places such as St. Vincent's Hospital, where they're just overwhelmed. Hundreds of people are burned from head to toe, according to Dr. Stephen Stern at St. Vincent's Hospital in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. The whole of lower Manhattan is coated with a half-inch of dust. Lee Cowan is live in that tip of Manhattan now covered by smoke. Lee?
Hi, Dan. Perhaps a firefighter summed this up really the best way. He said that, frankly, you're looking at ghosts down here. What his fear is that the command post, at least the first command post that was set up after the first explosion, was just to the west of the North Tower. And what he fears now is that they were right in the line as that building collapsed some hour and a half ago. Now, he said those are some of the best, some of the brightest folks that know exactly how to work this kind of search and rescue effort, some of the logistics, who to put where and why, and he hasn't heard from them since. That's what he's worried about the most. Excuse me. We talked to the building manager of the World Trade Center just a short while ago. He said while he was on his floor trying to evacuate people, he got out of the building about a second before it collapsed. He said just on the floor that he was trying to evacuate people on, there were hundreds and hundreds of people trapped as it collapsed. He barely got out. He doused the people inside, made it much any better than he did. We talked to a person just a short while ago who said he actually tried to run into the building. Didn't work there, was passing by, trying to rescue as many people as he could. He's now been taken to the hospital because he has some injuries with his lungs. A lot of stories like that out here, Dan, that we're hearing. People going in, trying to do their best, but at this point, there seems like there's so little left of the building. We can't get much closer now than about a block away, which is where we were about 5 minutes ago. But clearly, everybody here is worried exactly what's going to be found excuse me, underneath the rubble when they get down there, Dan. Yeah.
Lee Cowan, where the smoke permeates the air. A horrendous act of terror has, in a matter of minutes, changed the most famous skyline in the world. No one will ever look at this skyline again in exactly the same way. These attacks have forced evacuation of all government buildings in Washington, including the White House and other tall buildings across the country. And we say the evacuation of the White House, we're told that Vice President Cheney with Condoleezza Rice, who's head of the National Security Council, are in the Situation Room of the White House, which has its own special security. Cell phone communications on the East Coast have been severely interrupted, and you are urged not to make cell phone calls, particularly unless you absolutely have to. All commercial aircraft have been grounded in the United States. We were told earlier that Canada had ordered a grounding of aircraft in Canada. The New York City primary election for mayor was called off today. Stock markets are closed. World leaders are expressing shock and horror. Foreign financial markets fell sharply on news of these attacks. The key London investment index plummeted a little over 5%. Oil prices went up by 3%. U.S. markets were closed. Go back to Harold Dow as we look at these scenes from lower Manhattan. Harold, the bravery, the heroism of the police and firemen who plunged into this extremely dangerous situation needs to be noted.
Well, there's no question, Dan. When I arrived on the scene, I ran into one of the police officers that I knew there, Cliff Hollingsworth. He was trying to get me to some areas, and I know when the building started coming down, he ran in one direction and I ran in the other. But these firemen, these rescue people who were there, these men and women came in to help try to save lives. And I suppose they were looking for other explosions, but I don't think anyone thought at that point that this tremendous building would come crashing down so quickly. I mean, as you saw from the video we just looked at, the heavy steel girders of part of that building and the concrete all crashing down with the dust, landing on these people who were trying to save lives inside those buildings.
And we've noted before the distinct possibility that there may still be people trapped inside the debris of these collapsed buildings. That we'll have to see. Now, this just in, President Bush, we're now told, is to make a statement. This would be his second statement of the day from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Now, that's, you know, at Shreveport, Louisiana. Now, if you're asking, well, we thought the president was flying back to Washington from Florida. That was the widespread assumption, but assumption is the mother of a lot of erroneous reporting. And in this case, the assumption proved to be incorrect because the president, for reasons not yet explained, but no doubt will be explained, flew from Florida to Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana, and we're told that the president will make a statement from Barksdale Air Force Base shortly. We, of course, will carry that as part of our continuing CBS News live coverage. Dan Rather at CBS News World Headquarters in New York with one of our most experienced.
Okay, of course, we want to bring you up to date on what exactly is going on here in the state of Massachusetts. As we finish listening to Dan Rather, you can see there at the podium Acting Governor Jane Swift. She's going to bring us up to date on what's going on here in the state of Massachusetts.
Let me just say, first and foremost, that I join with all Americans in being shocked and saddened with the events that have happened this morning to Massachusetts families and citizens who may have lost their life in these terrorist attacks. I am saddened, and I express my deepest sympathy to those families. We have taken all prudent and necessary steps in Massachusetts to make sure that the families of the Commonwealth are protected and that they're safe. We have not received any specific threats against any Massachusetts citizens or any Massachusetts places or structures, and we continue to feel confident and comfortable that the public and the citizens of Massachusetts are secure, and will continue to take all necessary steps in order to guarantee that. I join with the President, with all appropriate state and federal agencies in being committed to making sure that whomever is responsible for these terrorist attacks will be brought to justice. I also want to convey one special message to the citizens of the 9th Congressional District. I think the most important thing that the citizens of Massachusetts can do today is to show up in large numbers to vote. Terrorists operate by creating a culture of fear. It is understandable that citizens of Massachusetts, seeing these reports on television, would have some fear. I want them to know that we will take all necessary actions and have taken actions to make sure that our public voting places are safe. We will continue to have a state police presence at those places, but the best thing that citizens of our great country and our great Commonwealth can do today is to send a very strong message that we will not bend to the terror that has been inflicted on our citizens and on our nation, and we will not shut down democratic exercises of government. And the most important exercise of our ability as a nation to be self-governed is by being able to go without fear to cast a vote in an election. So the election will continue. The Attorney General and I feel very strongly that people should go out and vote, and I'm confident that people will be safe, both those who work at the polls and those who exercise their right that I hope they treasure more deeply today than on any other day to go and vote at the ballot box in the 9th Congressional District. Do you have any questions?
The Secretary of State is looking into the possibility of suspending the election today, the primary election. Are you aware of that?
The Attorney General and I just talked to the Secretary of State. We conveyed to him our confidence that there has been no specific threat against any polling place or any facility in Massachusetts, that we have taken all appropriate steps to protect the safety of the citizens and families of Massachusetts, including those in the 9th Congressional District, and that it is both of our strong feeling that this election should proceed, that it is the strongest statement as Americans that we can make in the face of a terrorist attack. I'll let the Attorney General add anything.
I agree with Governor Swift. I've told the Secretary of State that it is my belief, along with the governors, that this election continue. I will take, and I have instructed him, I will take no legal action to suspend this election. This is an important day. It's a very sad day. It's a tragic day. But it's important that we preserve our right to vote. We are a democracy, and government will carry on. I'm very pleased the governor has taken the appropriate steps, not only to ensure that there's protections so that people can vote, but also taking measures with the other agencies that the appropriate protections and security measures throughout the state are in place. And I want to thank the governor for her leadership on this.
Governor, is there a state of emergency right now, and can you talk about what that means to the residents of the state?
There's no state of emergency in Massachusetts. Our National Guard is ready, but has not been to a great degree called upon. If in fact there is any threat or any request, if there are requests for assistance from New York, if there are requests from the federal government for assistance, we stand ready. The state police are on a stage 1 alert, which only makes all personnel available. But again, let me just convey that there hasn't been a specific threat against any Massachusetts institution, against any place. We are taking prudent steps. I will refrain from specifying what those steps are, but the state police and other public safety officials have plans that have been in place to respond in case of such an event, to continue to protect the safety of the families of the Commonwealth, and we've taken those steps.
Governor, from this state, things are going to be changing. Obviously, society is going to have to adjust to more security. Things will have to change in the state. How are we going to adjust to that?
My most important job today is to assure the families of Massachusetts that as these events have unfolded, we have been and will continue to take steps to protect their safety. As we get more information and determine necessary responses, I'll be prepared to address those, but I don't think that's a question for today. I think for today, we need to first and foremost express our sadness, particularly to the families who may have been impacted and may have suffered enormous losses because of this tragedy. But I'm not going to start speculating on future steps. I'm confident in the things that we've done to date this morning and that we'll continue to do to ensure that our system of government can move forward, to make sure that commerce, to the greatest degree possible, moves forward.
Whether it's the Red Cross or the National Guard, any request, formal request for help, and if not, what can people do who may want to go ahead and start helping people before this drama unfolds?
I have spoken first thing this morning to Governor Pataki's chief of staff and made it clear to him that we stand ready in Massachusetts to provide whatever assistance necessary as they obviously deal with a situation of enormity to the degree that we can't even begin to comprehend. Even when you see the pictures on TV, I'm not sure we can comprehend everything they're going through today. There was one request to the National Guard to send some F-15s into New York airspace. That was, we honored that request. I believe there's a search and rescue team out of Beverly that was also requested to be activated. We have done that. Each of the individuals here has relationships and established communication plans with their counterparts in New York, and we are prepared, and I've expressed personally to Governor Pataki's staff that we will send whatever support is necessary. We also are cognizant of the fact that Massachusetts hospitals may also be required to help deal with the tragedy down there. We're prepared on that front as well. I'm not going to get into specific numbers. We are responding to whatever requests come to the National Guard. That's the only one that's come to date.
Investigating security measures in Logan, investigating what happened there.
I think you need to know that we will cooperate fully with all the appropriate investigative authorities. We are already beginning to do that, and I'm not going to go any further than that. I think it's premature. Logan Airport has activated their Family Assistance Center, as I believe Joe Lawless informed the public earlier.
Governor, what do you tell residents of this state that are frightened by what happened? We left the city a couple of hours ago, saw people screaming out of many of the high-rises and some of the buildings, the crew, the Hancock. These people are frightened. They're scared. We all saw the images of what happened in New York this morning. What can you tell people that will make them feel safe about coming back to work tomorrow if that's when they're going to come back to work?
Well, certainly, let me just say, I understand that people would be scared. There are there have been some events this morning that are just incredible and vicious and awful. And certainly a natural reaction is fear. That is what terrorists seek to unleash on our society, is a first and primary attack that has taken precious human life, and then secondarily to paralyze our economic centers and our system of government through fear. And I want families in Massachusetts to know that all the individuals gathered here with me are working diligently every single hour of the day today and will continue to protect their safety. We have identified areas of vulnerability. Those are longstanding plans that were in place, and we're taking whatever steps are called for to protect the citizens and families of the Commonwealth.
Governor, do you plan on reopening state offices tomorrow?
We took a precautionary measure because of the fact that often state and public buildings can be viewed as a target to send non-essential state employees home. I will reevaluate that decision as information becomes available, but at this point in time, I see no reason why people would not be able to return to work tomorrow.
Governor, there was a security lapse at Logan this morning. I mean, apparently someone hopped on a plane and hijacked it.
I'm not going to confirm or comment on any information that is best released by appropriate investigative authorities.
Who's leading the investigation?
The appropriate investigative authorities and Massport officials are cooperating fully with them.
Governor, we're at a level 2 alert here in Massachusetts. The highest is 4. What would be involved in raising that to a level 3 or all the way to the top of level 4?
I am not going to speculate on decisions that might be made in the future, except to say that there haven't been any specific threats made against Massachusetts citizens or any place in Massachusetts. We are aware of the potential targets for terrorist attacks, and we've taken necessary steps to protect the public safety. And I'm not going to comment on what we might do, because I think it's important that people understand we are doing everything necessary right now to respond to the situation.
Governor, where were you when you first heard about this?
Like many Americans, I was at home with my family, getting ready to begin my day when my office contacted me and informed me of this tragedy.
Where will you manage the situation from, Governor? Here, out west, or back in the State House?
Wherever my presence is needed in order to make sure that the citizens of the Commonwealth are safe, that we're responding to any situation that arises. We are here right now just because of the ease of communication from this setting. Some of you may have experienced the fact that when something like this happens, phone lines tend to get snarled, and so at least in the early hours of the day, it seemed most appropriate to be here solely for ease of communication.
Did that happen? Did the phone lines get snarled on the state level in the early stages?
I don't want to comment on things. All I can say is that it was not always as easy as it should have been for phone conversations to happen for me personally, and but I have problems with my signal when there isn't a national emergency.
There was a lot of chaos this morning on the federal government on that side, where the president was, where Colin Powell was, and there was an image that was portrayed to us that the federal government was in chaos in the very early stages.
I think it's very important for us to say, the federal government, our institution of government, is not in chaos. I will join with all Americans in supporting the president and making sure that whomever is responsible for these cowardly terrorist attacks is brought to justice.
Can you tell us about your discussions with the White House, with any top-level people, just on keeping those lines of communication open? Is everything...
We are responding to requests that are made. We are sharing information through appropriate channels so that we can protect the citizens of Massachusetts, and I'm not going to go further than that.
Governor, you said there were no specific threats. Are there any general threats? Have there been any type of threats whatsoever? You said there were no specific...
There have been no specific threats. Obviously, if a terrorist attack of this magnitude happens in one part of our country, I think folks throughout our entire country are responding with an enhanced level of concern, an enhanced level of protection for potential targets. But we have not received any specific threats on any potential target. But like many other states in the country, we are certainly, I don't want to make it sound like we haven't responded. We are responding. Colonel DeFava and the folks at the state police have made sure that we are in a position to protect the citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Been listening to Governor Jane Swift as she addressed the media this morning from Framingham. The governor saying that the state of Massachusetts right now is not under a state of emergency. The governor saying that there are no specific threats against Massachusetts residents throughout these terrorist attacks this morning. However, we are being told that Boston police are on high alert at this hour. The governor clarified one thing for us as we were talking about the special primary to fill Congressman Joe Moakley's seat. The governor saying that the primary will go on today as scheduled. We had been reporting this morning that Secretary of State Bill Galvin was going to ask the state Supreme Court to suspend the primary. The governor has clarified that, saying that will not happen, that the election will go on today because there have been no threats at any polling places or voting places around the state. So people who have not voted in that primary should, if they choose to, go out and vote today. In addition to that, we're hearing that flags are around the state, specifically at the Prudential Center in Boston, are now being lowered to half staff at this hour. We're also being told that the Pilgrim nuclear power plant in Plymouth is on high alert, and that officials there assume that other nuclear power plants across the country are on high alert as well. The Mass Pike is now toll-free. Amtrak service has been suspended throughout the Northeast Corridor for the rest of the day. The governor is saying that she'll make a decision on state employees later in the day whether or not state offices will open. Just want to clarify one point. The two flights that were involved in the crashes this morning from Boston are American Airlines Flight 11. It was from Boston to Los Angeles. It crashed into the World Trade Center this morning. There were 81 passengers, 2 pilots, 9 crew members on a Boeing 767. The second flight from Boston that was involved this morning was United Airlines Flight 175. It was flying to Los Angeles. They aren't saying right now where that plane actually crashed. There were 56 passengers, 2 pilots, 7 crew members on board. That Boeing 767 left Boston at 7:58 this morning. We have some videotape that was shot around the city today, specifically tape, I believe, outside the Prudential Center, which was evacuated this morning, along with the Hancock and other high-rises around the state. You can see they are there lowering the flag to half staff in honor of all the lives that were lost today on this very, very sad day. What we're going to do now is we're going to rejoin Dan Rather. For now, this is Joe Shortley from the Channel 4 Newsroom.
Bombed in the sense that American Airlines says 2 of its planes were hijacked, and then they were we know not how, the details of them, but they were crashed into the World Trade Center itself. These scenes are where the debris is thick and the smoke goes like clouds and will for a long while in Lower Manhattan, on the edge of Greenwich Village, right at the tip of Manhattan, with the Statue of Liberty in the background. These attacks have occurred one day before the sentencing of an associate of Osama bin Laden in connection with the embassy bombings in Tanzania in 1998. The sentencing of this associate of bin Laden, and forgive my pronunciation, Mohammed al-Okali, the accused in that were convicted in a court here in Manhattan. They face the death penalty. They're charged with directly assisting the American embassy bombing in Kenya and in Saudi Arabia. In the background, of course, there was another terrorist attack in the Cobalt Towers in Saudi Arabia in the 1990s, still unsolved, although there were many in the U.S. government convinced that that bombing of the U.S. Air Force Towers apartment building really in Saudi Arabia was connected to the government of Iran. That was a belief, but there was never solid evidence put out to that. These are scenes from earlier in the day, but now we're going to take you to Belleville Hospital as soon as we can put up the pictures. New York hospitals are overwhelmed with the casualties. In Bellevue Hospital, every available doctor, nurse, orderly, working on cases of the injured. If you're saying to yourself, what can I do? One thing you can do is stay off the telephone. That would be helpful, particularly cell phones. The other thing you can do is think about, not at this moment, but think about contributing blood, because blood plasma supplies are going to be very short, to say the least, as New York City deals with an unprecedented situation in which the mayor has said and the police have also said there are bound to be tremendous numbers of dead. The leader of the Hamas organization has denied any responsibility in the attacks. Well, there'll be a long line of people denying responsibility for these attacks. Leaders of the Taliban, the radical fundamentalist Islamic group ruling Afghanistan, which have been in the process of protecting Osama bin Laden, we were told have been quickly gotten out what can only be described as a public relations operation, denying that they have anything to do with this. But all of that will be dealt with as time goes along. Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes 2 correspondent and another veteran CBS News correspondent who work here and abroad, is in downtown New York. Scott?
Dan, the last 3 hours or so, I've been down here a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. We're just now getting the first wave of firemen and paramedics who have been working the scene around the rubble of the World Trade Center buildings. They're starting to walk out now as their ships are replaced, and we've had an opportunity to talk to some of them. One gentleman, actually an elderly man, who told me he was a retired New York City fireman who ran to the scene when he heard what had happened to help out, described for us a scene in terms of bodies and body parts strewn all about the area around the two World Trade Center towers. In the streets, he described them, on the sidewalks. He said there didn't seem to be many walking wounded in the area. What he saw primarily was bodies and parts of bodies. He didn't care to estimate how many there were. I asked him if he could give me some idea, and he looked at me and said it's countless. We also spoke with Lieutenant Rene Diavola of Battalion 4 here in the New York City Fire Department. He's an EMT. He was the first EMT supervisor at the scene after the first airplane hit the first tower. He told us that he was working triage when the second airplane hit the second World Trade Center tower. He saw the airplane come in and saw it cut the building, as you have already seen on videotape. It seems almost in half when it hit. He described the debris raining down on the firefighters, the paramedics, the police officers who were responding to the very first of the two plane impacts. He said, I saw the building collapse. There was debris falling all around me. And at the point that the first building came down, he said that the firefighters were trapped in a swirling mass of debris and smoke, and he described how he and other firefighters literally held hands and walked up the street to try to get to safety. As soon as he found a telephone, he told me that he called his wife to tell her that he loved her. We have spoken to a number of firemen who have come out of there. You have to understand, Dan, the difficulty down there is it's impossible to see. I'm standing just a couple of blocks away. As you see on your live cameras, there's a huge towering cloud still above lower Manhattan. And down here on the ground, people are telling us that only a couple of blocks closer in, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. It's very, very difficult to work, to see, to breathe. One fireman stepped out of there and told us, the world is an evil place. I know that now. Dan?
Scott Pelley in lower Manhattan. We've just passed the 1 o'clock hour in the east. A little more than 4 hours ago is when all of this started. 3 hijacked planes crashed into major U.S. landmarks this morning. They destroyed both of New York's 110-story tall towers, and they plunged into the Pentagon. This is the timeline. The South Tower of the World Trade Center was hit around 9 o'clock. Then the North Tower was hit. Air traffic in the U.S. was closed about 9:30. President Bush spoke from Florida. At that time, he's spoken since via videotape from Louisiana. Around 10 o'clock, a plane crashed at the helicopter pad at the Pentagon, did damage, set fire to portions of the Pentagon. There have been some casualties. Any dead, we don't know. There were some injured because we saw them at the Pentagon. Then the South Tower incredibly collapsed. Then the North Tower, the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center collapsed. And one pauses after you say that because, you know, it's almost unbelievable. And then there was a plane crash in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. That's in the Pittsburgh area. Now, Pentagon spokesman Glenn Flood is just now quoted as saying, and I quote him directly, that there have been extensive casualties and an unknown number of fatalities at the Defense Department. That's the first time they've confirmed that there have been casualties. We go to CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin, our national security correspondent. David?
Dan, over my shoulder, you can see the fire engine still trying to put out the fire that began when the plane hit the building. If you were at a different location, you would be able to see that that plane cut into that building just like an axe into a birthday cake. This is the west side of the building. People who were working on the east side of the building say they had their windows blown out and they saw a fireball. This for the largest office building in the world. So this plane caused extensive damage. Now, eyewitnesses have described a plane which the FBI decided was a description of a commercial 767 airliner or a 757, which would be consistent with the report of the airliner being hijacked, the American Airlines airliner being hijacked as it was taking off from Dulles bound for the West Coast. No confirmation that that is what happened. As to extensive casualties, certainly anybody that was on board that plane could not have survived that crash, and anybody who was in the direct path of that plane when it hit the building could not have survived. From a different perspective, you can see that floors 2, 3, 4, and 5 have all collapsed in on each other. It is a sight which I'm sure nobody in their wildest imagination thought they would ever see.
David Martin at the Pentagon, our national security correspondent. Jim Stewart, one of the best reporters in America when it comes to this kind of situation, has been working this story from the very beginning in Washington, and has new information about the early reports of a plane crashing at or near Camp David, the presidential retreat outside of Maryland. Jim?
Dan, the FBI now is trying to sort together what has actually happened here and what they still don't understand. And what they do know has happened is, of course, 3 separate terrorist attacks in the United States: the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and some event that has occurred in Pennsylvania, including that affected a commercial airliner. Because of the proximity of that crash of the commercial airline in Pennsylvania to Camp David, there is a presumption by some in law enforcement that Camp David may have been the target of that attack. That, of course, was a hijacked commercial aircraft that we are told did not respond to repeated attempts to communicate with it either by the military or the FAA. Now, other things that the government is confirming at this hour: number one, they received no warnings. They had no hint of any attack against domestic targets in the United States. Number two, they have not received any claim for any of these attacks from anyone. And number three, although they have no evidence that this is the case, they are assuming and presuming that there could be additional attacks within the United States and are reacting appropriately. To do so, they have set up command posts, we are told, in Washington, in Phoenix, and in Los Angeles. Moments ago, the Attorney General of the United States returned from out of town. He was taken by an armored car convoy to the FBI headquarters. Would you ask him, please? Excuse me, Dan, we have a little bit of confusion here in our newsroom at the moment. I can also say that the intelligence community is now saying officially that they do believe that these attacks have the signature, as one official put it, of the Al-Qaeda organization. That, of course, is the terrorist organization that is under the control of Osama bin Laden. They said that is, quote, our lead theory. Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington. Now at Barksdale Air Force Base at Shreveport, Louisiana, President Bush is about to come out. We believe this is live, although we've been told earlier they'd be played on videotape. Here is the president. Well, folks, it's live television. In a situation like this, I know you understand that mistakes happen. To err is to human, but to really foul up requires a computer, and we've had some computer difficulty. We're going to once again try to bring you, and we now believe, I know this is confusing, but let's face it, it's a confusing situation, that the president flew from Florida, apparently to Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana. We were told that he would appear, make a statement on videotape. Then we thought it was live. Now we're going to the videotape. We're having some difficulty, but here is the president, we hope, speaking on videotape from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport. We're going to try again to show you the videotape of the president speaking here.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush on videotape from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Where the president is at this moment, we do not know. The president said freedom itself was attacked by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. With us here at our CBS News World headquarters in New York is one of the world's outstanding experts on terrorism, Jerry Hauer, who's the former commissioner of the mayor's office here in New York City of Emergency Management. He's now a terrorist expert with Kroll Associates. Jerry Hauer, thanks for being with us.
Sure, Dan.
A lot of talk about rage and revenge. It's being said in Washington, this quote bears the signature of Osama bin Laden. What is the workaday American to think about what has happened in our country today?
Well, I think the first focus right now has to be on the victims and the families of this horrific event, and on the work of the rescue workers that both here and in Washington. Certainly our prayers go out to them. And we've seen just a devastating event today. At the same time, we have to recognize that this was a cowardly act. This was an attack on the United States. I'm sure that the good work of the FBI in time, they will track down. Certainly this has the signature of bin Laden, but I think it's premature to point fingers. I think that we need to let the FBI do their work and try and point the finger as time goes on. Right now, the focus has to be on the response here in New York and in Washington.
Well, let's talk about that. What is happening at the city?
Joe Shortsleeve in the Channel 4 newsroom. We want to bring you up to date on how these terrorist attacks have affected people here in Boston and throughout the state of Massachusetts. As you're well aware at this point, Logan Airport remains closed at this hour. We want to tell you which two flights were directly involved with the Boston connections. The first is American Airlines Flight 11 that crashed into the World Trade Center. 81 passengers, 2 pilots, and 9 crew members were on board. It was a Boeing 767. The other plane that crashed this morning was United Airlines Flight 175. It was from Boston to Los Angeles. They aren't saying right now where that plane actually crashed. There were 56 passengers, 2 pilots, and 7 crew members on board that flight. It was a Boeing 767. It left Boston at 7:58 this morning. What we want to do now is check in with Josh Binswanger. The governor spoke just a few moments ago. One thing she did say is that the special primary to elect a new congressman in the 9th District will go on. Correct, Josh?
That's exactly right, Joe. To quote her specifically, she said the best thing is to send a message that we will not bend, that we will not shut down democratic exercises of government in the wake of this terrorist attack. As you just mentioned a short while ago, Acting Governor Swift, Attorney General Tom Riley, and a host of other state officials were here from the MEMA bunker to address the Commonwealth. Let's take a listen.
Let me just say, first and foremost, that I join with all Americans in being shocked and saddened with the events that have happened this morning to Massachusetts families and citizens who may have lost their life in these terrorist attacks. I am saddened, and I express my deepest sympathy to those families. We have taken all prudent and necessary steps in Massachusetts to make sure that the families of the Commonwealth are protected and that they're safe. We have not received any specific threats against any Massachusetts citizens or any Massachusetts places or structures, and we continue to feel confident and comfortable that the public and the citizens of Massachusetts are secure.
Now, the state is operating under a level 2 alert. What that means is that they're not taking any real action at this time, and what citizens can do is to be vigilant. Stay home, stay off the streets, follow what's happening on the news, but there is no impediment to your daily lives. As a matter of fact, Governor was asked yesterday, earlier this morning, I should say, whether or not official offices will be open tomorrow at this juncture in time. She plans on conducting business as usual tomorrow here in the state of Massachusetts. Now, she spoke earlier also with Governor Pataki's staff down in New York to offer any assistance. They did request some National Guard F-15s to be flown into New York airspace. That request was followed up on. They have also requested some assistance from a search and rescue team in Beverly. That team has been activated. Where exactly they will be sent, we do not know at this particular time. But the governor, as of this moment, is still here at MEMA headquarters in Framingham. We'll keep you apprised of any other situations as they occur. Joe, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh. We're now being told that the National Park Service has closed all monuments, including the USS Constitution and the Bunker Hill Monument here in the Boston area. Added security at the USS Constitution. Flags are being flown at half-staff now around the state. Nuclear power plants, including the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant down in Plymouth, we're told, are on high alert at this hour. Now, high-rises in Boston were evacuated earlier today when these terrorist acts became known, including the John Hancock, the Prudential, and other buildings in the downtown area. Mayor Menino sent home all non-essential state employees. He spoke earlier this morning. Let's listen and hear what he had to say.
It cuts the heart of all of us, and life in America has changed forever because of this incident that we've had this morning. And our prayers are with the families that were lost in this senseless incident. So I just ask everyone in our city to step back and say a little prayer for these individuals.
Obviously, the effect on everyone's psyche today has yet to be measured, but people throughout New England are very touched by what has happened here. There's a tremendous amount of sadness, a tremendous amount of shock. Schools, many schools in the area are closed, primarily colleges. As far as what we'd like to do is we'd like to go down to the back bay now, where I believe it is Robin Hamilton is standing by. Yes, Robin. What's going on there, Robin?
Exactly right. Good afternoon, Joe. Well, the mood is extremely somber and very tense. Earlier this morning, members from the Prudential Center, they closed that building. They don't want to call it an evacuation because they don't want people to panic. They do want to say it was a voluntary closing. So people have been leaving that building since 9 o'clock this morning. The same was true for the Hancock buildings. All 6 buildings evacuated, 12,000 employees. Again, everyone is just under a very heightened state of tension after all of this. We had a chance to speak to some people earlier today, and we got their thoughts about this whole situation. Hundreds of employees made a mass exit from the Prudential Center minutes after the Twin Tower and Pentagon disasters.
I never thought until they talked about the Pentagon that we were in danger, kind of national problem. So just thought it was a local New York thing, and now we kind of realize it's a scary national thing again.
Just working in a big high-rise like this, I just can't imagine. I just wonder what's going on.
The property manager of the Prudential Center issued a voluntary evacuation shortly after 9 o'clock, but most employees felt they had no other choice but to leave.
And then we got confirmation on the radio, and we took it extremely seriously because we're hanging off the Prudential, and so we called everybody off of the building because we know it was a life-threatening situation.
Now, other buildings around the area have been closed as well. The streets are pretty much empty. There have been a few ambulances and squad cars going by. We're not exactly sure where they're going to, but people are trying to stay calm. But again, other buildings have been closed during this time. We have Ted Landsmark, who's the president of Boston Architectural Center. He was one of the people who encouraged people to leave as well. Just give us an idea of what was your procedure this morning.
Well, of course, it's been a very difficult morning because people are watching all of the news reports. They're listening to the radio reports. There's really not a lot of work that people can do at this point. People are trying to get through to friends in New York. Several of us have friends who work at the World Trade Center, and of course, we don't know what their condition is. And so we checked with the state and the city offices, and many of the colleges, such as the Boston Architectural Center, made the decision that it made more sense to close, to keep faculty and students out of town for today, to keep people off of the public transit, even though that's apparently been beefed up, and to really let people just reflect a little bit.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And again, the mood here is very somber. There is a police presence here. They are making sure traffic just flows easily and that people stay calm. But again, people are very tense at this point. Back to you, Joe.
All right, Robin, as we watch the videotape in the right-hand corner there of the plane actually hitting the World Trade Center this morning, I'm also told that the financial district in Boston is basically a ghost town at this hour. Employees have been told to go home, and they didn't have to be told twice. All off-duty Boston EMS personnel have been called into work. The local Red Cross is urging anybody who can donate blood to do so. The need is crucial. It is critical at this hour. Most of the blood they are trying to get down to New York to help people there. Also, TJX, a local company located in Framingham, is the parent company for Marshalls and TJ Maxx. The CEO gathered employees together there today to tell them that they believe as many as 7 employees of TJX were on the American Airlines flight this morning that crashed into the World Trade Center. We, of course, will stay on top of this developing story, exactly how it affects Boston and the state of Massachusetts. We'll bring you updates throughout the day. For now, let's go back to Dan Rather and CBS.
And if, in fact, the groups are found, and if it's bin Laden, I'm sure that the right retaliation will be swift. It will be forthcoming. But you don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and find out that, in fact, at the end of the day, that you've retaliated against the wrong people. And so I think that clearly the focus right now has to be on what's going on here and in Washington, on the rescue efforts. And at the same time, there is a parallel track going on where they are looking, the FBI is going to be mobilizing massive resources to bring in here and into Washington, and they will be looking to try and track down the cowards that did this to our country.
Jerry Hauer of Crowell & Associates, the former commissioner of Mayor Giuliani's Office for Emergency Management here in New York. I hope you can stick around with us. Jerry, you've been very helpful, and I appreciate it. Quickly, Israel has closed its airspace to foreign carriers. Airlines in Europe have ordered flights bound for the U.S. to do U-turns and come back or find alternate landing points outside the United States. The European Union foreign ministers are to hold an emergency meeting on tomorrow. And we go to Mika Brzezinski, who is in Lower Manhattan. Mika.
Well, Dan, I'm with Larry Rosen. We're at PS 89, where his son goes to school. This school has been evacuated, and he's looking for his son. Larry is also looking for his daughter. She's 3 years old, and her babysitter. Larry, tell me exactly where they were, where your apartment is.
Well, I live in Gateway Plaza, which is directly across the street in Battery Park City. I was uptown. I was actually in the subways when I heard the explosion. I didn't think much of it, went uptown to a client's, and then heard the news. And
you went to your apartment. Did you get close, and what did you see?
Well, I went back to my apartment from uptown, and the windows were blown in, and there was soot all over. Barney doll was laying in the bed.
Is that your child's doll?
Yeah. I have a 3-year-old who was probably sleeping and a 7-year-old who is in the school that we're standing in right now.
Would they let you into your apartment?
They would not, but I was able to get in.
Is there a possibility they could be elsewhere?
I'm hopeful that they are elsewhere.
Okay. You're looking for your son, and I'm told that the children who are in this school have been taken to PS3 and PS41. The children in this school are all fine, according to the head custodian here. A lot of parents like you are coming and looking for the children. What did you want to say?
Tell my wife, Sherry, that I love her and I'm okay, and we'll get together and everything will be all right. I love you.
Larry Rosen, a father looking for his son, and I know you want to go now to the next schools, and those men over there through those doors can tell you where to go to find your son. Write down where they are. Okay, we'll find out for you. Ask the guys through the door. Can you help him, Mary? Dan, this is a story that's been repeated all morning here. Parents are coming, and they just want to see their kids when they hear of something like this happening literally 3 blocks from where their children were at school, a place that should be safe in their minds. It is, I think, a sense that you can only remotely imagine if you were a parent yourself. Dan, over to you now.
Mika Brzezinski in Lower New York. By the way, it was mentioned earlier that the border between the United States and Mexico was being closed, and it may have been mentioned at that time, if so erroneously, that the border with Canada was being closed. The border with the United States and Canada is the longest unguarded frontier in the world. And we're now told that the U.S.-Canadian border remains open. I underscore the word open in case there was any misunderstanding about that. Now, it's happened today. We've had, and I have in front of me just notes because such a confusing situation, the attack on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center here in New York. The Pentagon hit, and there have been fatalities at the Pentagon. We're not sure how many, but the Defense Department has, after a while, acknowledged that there have been some fatalities and some injured at the Pentagon. Then at Somerset, Pennsylvania, that's in the Pittsburgh area, an air crash there. And then a mysterious air crash in and around the Camp David, Maryland retreat. The president was not there. You know, he was in Florida earlier. That latter one, the Camp David area crash of a plane reported by an FBI official earlier, remains a mystery at this moment. But that's what's been happening today. There's been, there's no getting around it, a tremendous loss of life at the World Trade Center on the tip of Manhattan. 50,000 people work in the Twin Towers and in the immediate surrounding area, and thousands of more people visit it. Authorities had been trying to evacuate those who work in the World Trade Center when the glass and steel skyscrapers, first one, then the other, came down with thunderous roars. That happened within about 90 minutes of first one plane hitting one tower and then another plane hitting another tower. Deborah Bryant, a CBS News employee, saw both explosions. She's back from the scene and with us now in the studio. Deborah, tell us what you saw.
Well, it was early this morning, and I was exercising, and I felt a huge wave of sound wave crash. It sounded like a supersonic, when the planes go supersonic. And the building shook, and we had no idea what it was. And then there was a plume of smoke that went right up the World Trade Center, and then it started showering us with papers, debris, and not so much smoke. The second plane crash, we were standing at the window of our apartment and looking at the trade tower, and the plane went flying right into the side of it.
Did you see the aircraft?
Yes.
Tell me, describe the plane to me. Two-motored, two-engine, four-engine?
It was impossible to tell. It was so unusual to even see a plane that large.
You're looking out your apartment window.
Right.
And a large airplane is headed straight for the World Trade Center.
It had come around the back. We're on the east side of the street, so we didn't see the approach around the World Trade Tower, but we saw it as it smashed into the side.
What did you say to one another? What did you think?
We basically said we're getting out of here and ran downstairs. We couldn't get out the front door because of the smoke. By that time, the smoke was, it's like a very, very fine ash, and it was black outside. You couldn't see, and there was a lot of debris coming down. So we decided to go back in the building, sit on the interior wall, and wait, which we did until it cleared. And we tried to make our way out and around the corner to the East River where we could see some blue sky. And then we heard another loud crash, and I guess that's, it was my impression that there was a bomb. And then we saw the tower collapse as we were running down the block. And I ducked into a bank with a few other people from our building.
What a sight to see both those towers collapse.
It's like a very, very fine ash, and it was black outside. You couldn't see, and there was a lot of debris coming down. So we decided to go back in the building, sit on the interior wall, and wait, which we did until it cleared. And we tried to make our way out and around the corner to the East River where we could see some blue sky. And then we heard another loud crash, and I guess that's, it was my impression that there was a bomb. And then we saw the tower collapse as we were running down the block. And I ducked into a bank with a few other people from our building.
What a sight to see both those towers collapse. We go to Bob Schieffer in Washington for what's happening there, and particularly information on the Pentagon, which is still part of it, is a smoking ruin.
Well, Dan, you can see, and as I'm still at the same location I was when we last spoke, north of the White House in downtown Washington, D.C., and you can see they are still putting water on the fire over at the Pentagon, but this was some blast because it is still burning. There's been intense smoke all morning. Dan, I would just note that I would describe the government in Washington as in a mood of quiet rage at this point. You know, the Democrats and Republicans were locked in a real partisan battle when the president was coming back to Washington. Everybody was expecting a real partisan scrap, but all that has gone by the by. Trent Lott and Tom Daschle, the respective leaders of the Republican and Democratic parties on Capitol Hill, have been taken to a secure location. We will say that first, but they issued a joint statement saying they are totally in agreement, they are totally behind the president, and that the full resources of the government will be brought to bear to not only track down these people, but also to see that they are punished. Now, Vice President Cheney, we are told, is also in a secure location. I reached a member of his staff just a short time ago. She would not say where, understandably, where the Vice President is at this point, but he is with his chief of staff and with some of his national security advisors in what she called a secure place. Senator Chuck Hagel, the Republican from Nebraska, may have put it best earlier this morning in describing the mood of Washington. He said, America is changed forever. I will say again, if these people were trying to get the attention of the official government, they got it. And they will rue the day, Dan, that they did.
Bob Schieffer in Washington. We mentioned earlier that Taliban rulers from Afghanistan were out quickly because realizing that they've been under some pressure to help the United States and others come up with Osama bin Laden. Whether Osama bin Laden had anything to do with these attacks today or not is not known. Yes, there's a lot of speculation out there that this was, quote, a signature of bin Laden, but nobody knows who's responsible for this. And a lot of people will have ideas, but nobody knows. And Bob Schieffer talks of a quiet rage in Washington. No doubt, as was the case after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor December 7th, 1941. There certainly was rage in the country at that time, but the rage quickly became a steady direction of determination. And the world knows how that eventually turned out. And one of the strong signals coming from our beloved United States of America today is that same kind of spirit is being mustered in the wake of this. Now, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani is on the telephone with us now. Mayor, thanks for being on the phone with us. Tell us what you know and what you think are the most important things for not just the people of New York, but the people of the United States to know at this hour.
Well, the first thing that I would like to say to the people of New York is to remain calm and just to try as best they can to go about their lives today. And if they're in Lower Manhattan, to evacuate it and leave so that we can get all of our rescue efforts going. We have hundreds, thousands actually, of emergency workers down in Lower Manhattan now trying to save as many lives as possible. The governor has deployed the National Guard, and they should be relieving us sometime early to late this afternoon. And we've gotten a tremendous cooperation from both the state and the federal government. From the first time that the plane hit the World Trade Center, the federal government closed down the airspace around the city, and they've been in close communication with us. And we're doing everything we can to try to save as many lives down there as possible.
Mayor Rudolph Giuliani live on the telephone with us now as you look at pictures from Lower Manhattan. Mayor, you've been quoted as saying that unquestionably the loss of life has been heavy. Any indication of how heavy that loss of life?
Dan, it's going to be some number that I almost don't even want to say. You know, I don't. It's going to be a very large number of people. I saw people jumping out of the top of the World Trade Center. I was in a building that got hit with the debris from the first tower that collapsed, and I know how many people were in the building at the time.
Any doubt in your mind that the final death toll is bound to be in the thousands?
I really don't want to say that. It's going to be very, very large, and something that it would be very hard for us to comprehend.
Mayor,
right now,
go ahead.
Right now, the only thing we can really focus on is to try as hard as we can to keep that number down as low as possible. And I'm very worried about a lot of my police officers and firefighters, some of whom I saw go into the building, and we haven't been able to find them yet.
Mayor, what are the possibilities that many people are still trapped in the debris?
There are people that are still trapped there, and there are parts of that area we can't get into right now because of the smoke condition and the fact that some buildings are still collapsing. We just got a report that 2 other smaller buildings in that area collapsed, including one that we were possibly in. So it's still a very dangerous situation for the firefighters and police officers that are there. But they're the best. I mean, they're the best in the world. And if whatever number can be saved, they will do it.
Mayor, you've just pointed out something that we were not aware of, that because of when you have the 2 tremendous buildings, 110 stories high, both these buildings collapsed, then there are buildings around these 2 twin towers that have collapsed.
And I was in one of them, 75 Barclay Street, and when the first tower collapsed, it created a tremendous smoke condition. It hit our building. We were trapped in our building for maybe 10, 15 minutes. So there are other buildings there that are affected by this, and there's no question that there are people, many people, still trapped there that we can't save. So that's what the police department and the fire department and the emergency services people are working on furiously. And the governor has deployed, I think it's about 1,700 National Guard that will be ready to relieve our people later this afternoon.
What are the chances, Mayor, now everybody knows we're in the early stages of this, what are the chances that you're going to need help and support from outside the city, perhaps even outside the state, of fire departments, police departments, as was the case in Oklahoma City?
We have already received offers of help, and the urban search and rescue teams, I think at least 2 of them, if not 3, have been tasked by FEMA to come here. and they'll probably be here later today or tomorrow. So, yes, we are going to need that help. We've already used hospitals outside the city of New York, in Westchester, in Nassau, in northern New Jersey, Rockland County, and we're working with fire personnel there to come into the city later today, tomorrow, and the next day to relieve our fire department, because this is going to be a terrible strain on them. Not only the people who are injured and hurt and worse, but rescue efforts like this really drain you. So we're going to need as much help as we can get. And we've had excellent coordination from Governor Pataki and from President Bush.
Mayor, we have reports from all over the city that hospitals in this city, and everybody knows New York has better hospitals than any other single place in the world, but that the hospitals are absolutely being overwhelmed.
The hospitals are absolutely overwhelmed. I was just on the phone with the director of St. Vincent's Hospital, which is the hospital that is the closest to where the attack took place. In fact, when I was rushing down there after the first plane hit, they were already deploying people, getting ready for triage, and they're overwhelmed. All the hospitals in the metropolitan area are overwhelmed, and we're getting a lot of help, as I said, from northern New Jersey, Nassau, Westchester. We'll move people there, and we are now, in order to take some of the pressure off the New York hospitals. That we are blessed with, 170 hospitals in New York City. So in that sense, at least we have 170 that we can call on, plus a surrounding area with another 200 hospitals that we can utilize.
Mayor, as the mayor of New York City, had you received information from intelligence agencies to be on any kind of special alert?
No specific information of any kind, right up to the moment that it happened.
Didn't have anybody saying, listen, be on some kind of special alert because Osama bin Laden or somebody else may be striking?
Not other than what the situation has been for the last 3 or 4 years, where, obviously, given the tensions in the world, there's almost a continued alert, but no specific information, no warning of any kind. And I've checked both with the police department and the FBI, and they had no warning.
Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, I appreciate you speaking to us live on the telephone as we played some video.
I would just like to say to the people of New York and to the people of America that this country, the city of New York and the United States of America is much bigger and greater than this, and we're going to overcome this. We're going to get through it. We're going to overcome it, and we're going to prove that democracy and law is our future, not this kind of vicious, horrible, inhumane kind of terrorism.
Mayor Giuliani,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Dateline's Freeport, Louisiana, Barksdale Air Force Base. Air Force One is reported to have taken off from Barksdale Air Force Base, where we played a videotape what the president had to say there a short while ago, for, we're told, points unknown. Now, to bring you up to date quickly on what's happened, particularly for those of you who may be joining us late or just tuning in, plane crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers in Lower Manhattan shortly before 9 a.m. this morning. Second plane crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center shortly after 9 a.m. President Bush was in Sarasota, Florida, called the crashes at that time an apparent terrorist attack and a, quote, national tragedy. Then an aircraft of some kind crashed into a helicopter pad at the Pentagon, damage, including some fatalities there. The Pentagon, of course.
Joe Shortsleeve in the Channel 4 newsroom. We want to bring you up to date on just exactly how these terrorist attacks are affecting lives here in Boston and throughout New England today. Before we tell you which flights were involved, I want to just bring you up to date on a statement from Governor Jane Swift today. She sent all non-essential state employees home. City's tallest building, John Hancock Tower, Prudential Building, International Place, they were all evacuated this morning. And Logan Airport, of course, remains closed. Now, Lisa Hughes is in New York City. She actually was in Logan Airport this morning and flew down to New York for something unrelated, obviously, to today's story. Now, Lisa, I'm very interested in what's going on in New York, obviously, but if you could talk a little bit about when you went through Logan Airport this morning, what was that like?
Joe, this morning when we left Logan Airport at about 7:20, it was like any other weekday. A lot of people getting on the Delta shuttle, which is what Joyce Kulhaywick and I were on. Again, we left about 7:20 in the morning. And when we got into New York City, there was a tremendous line of people here because apparently a storm yesterday here in New York City prevented a lot of people from getting into LaGuardia. We got a car service, and about 10 minutes after we left LaGuardia Airport, we could see the first of the Trade Center towers on fire. You could see the cloud of smoke spreading upward, a dark black smoke. I immediately called WBZ and talked to Tim White on our assignment desk, and it was at that point that the second plane hit the second tower. And I can tell you, we are still hearing the sirens here on the Upper West Side. There are F-15 circling the city now as a security measure. We know some of those have actually been called in from the Boston area, but I think it's safe to say that people in this city are positively shell-shocked, Joe.
Lisa, I spoke with a friend of mine who works right in downtown New York by phone this morning, and he said while at one hand they're asking people to go home, on the other hand all the roads are closed in many areas. How are people moving about?
Not very well, Joe. We know that most of the tunnels were closed when we came in this morning. We diverted and took another road into the city, another bridge. It's also difficult because the emergency personnel and the medical personnel are trying to get to all the appropriate places in the city right now. That's not easy either. And one of the things they're most concerned about is the total collapse of some of the infrastructure. You have telephones, transportation here. All of those things are shutting down intermittently. So they do want people in the Northeast, not just here in New York City, but in Boston and Philadelphia, elsewhere, to stay off their phones, and they want people who don't have to be in the city right now simply to stay at home.
Lisa, we'd like to, as we drop the videotape from the screen here, we'd like to take actually this is videotape shot earlier of actually one of the towers collapsing this morning, but we'd like to see where you are standing, Lisa, exactly on top of that building. If we could drop the videotape. Now, where exactly are you standing there?
Okay, we're standing on West 57th on the Upper West Side, and if you can see over my shoulder, it may not be easy, but you can see that cloud of smoke coming from the remains of one of those trade towers south of us. So we're a few miles away, but it's a cloud of smoke that you could see everywhere. And in fact, people in Brooklyn were even saying earlier today that there were pieces of paper positively raining down on them from the explosion. They could tell that these were from an office building of some kind, and that's quite a distance from the trade towers.
And if you could take us one.
It must have been shortly after 8:45. We had just gotten in the car from LaGuardia Airport. We were actually headed to the financial district, or very close to the financial district this morning. And after only being in the car probably for 5 or 10 minutes, I looked up and saw a cloud of black smoke. And if you followed that smoke, it went right to the first of the two towers. And I asked our driver, I said, is that one of the trade towers on fire? And he looked up. I mean, it could only be that. And he immediately turned on CBS News Radio, and there it was, the report of the first explosion. And we were there watching the building when the second plane hit the second tower, but our view of that tower was blocked, and we didn't see it.
All right, Lisa Hughes, obviously we'll be talking with you throughout the day and throughout the evening. We appreciate that live report from New York. Lisa Hughes is down in New York on a totally unrelated event today. I happened to travel through Logan Airport this morning just at the time that terrorists were boarding planes at Logan Airport. Thank you, Lisa. We will check back with you. We'd like to give everybody the flight information now of exactly the flights that were involved that originated from Boston's Logan Airport. You can see there American Airlines Flight 11. It's a Boeing 767. It was bound for Los Angeles. There were 92 passengers and crew on board. It is one of the planes that crashed into one of the towers. Also, United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767, also en route to Los Angeles. 65 passengers and crew on board. They have yet to tell us. They have told us that plane crashed, but they have not told us exactly where it did crash. The need for blood is critical, we are told, and that if you can donate blood, you're asked to do so. The need in New York is crucial at this hour. Let's check in now with Josh Binswanger. He is in Framingham, where Acting Governor Jane Swift spoke a short time ago. Josh?
All right, Joe, thank you very much. And do want to just follow up, having worked right across the street from the World Trade Towers for some time down in New York City, the biggest difficulty the crews are going to have at this particular juncture is limited space. That area of New York is all landfill, and due west of the towers is the Hudson Hudson River. The streets all come to a point. It's almost like leaving Boston Common where the streets all intersect with each other. There's very little room for them to work, not to mention the fact that the towers are directly above the 1 and 9 trains and the N and R trains. So there are large cavities under that existing structure to begin with. It's going to be a very difficult and long process to try and get people out who are trapped in those buildings as this rescue and search efforts continue. We do want to focus on Governor Swift and the comments that she made earlier today, shortly around 12:30 this afternoon, along with Attorney General Tom Riley and other state officials. She addressed people of the Commonwealth.
I also want to convey one special message to the citizens of the 9th Congressional District. I think the most important thing that the citizens of Massachusetts can do today is to show up in large numbers to vote. Terrorists operate by creating a culture of fear. It is understandable that citizens of Massachusetts, seeing these reports on television, would have some fear. I want them to know that we will take all necessary actions and have taken actions to make sure that our public voting places are safe. We will continue to have a state police presence at those places, but the best thing that citizens of our great country and our great Commonwealth can do today is to send a very strong message that we will not bend to the terror that has been inflicted on our citizens and on our nation.
Strong words from the governor in favor of the democratic process as the 9th District primaries are continuing at this hour. She also talked about the fact that it's important for people to remain calm. We are working on a level 2 alert that doesn't make a big change in terms of how the state is being run. They're not taking any real action, but they are encouraging residents of the Commonwealth to be vigilant. Stay on top of what is going on. If you are a non-essential state employee, you are encouraged to stay home. If you're at your office, you've been asked to go home this afternoon. Now, we also want to talk about some of the assistance that Massachusetts is providing the state of New York at this particular juncture. The governor spoke earlier with Governor Pataki's staff. They had requested the use of 2 F-15s out of Otis Air Force Base on the Cape. Those F-15s are in New York airspace at this time. And FEMA requested a search and rescue team from Beverly. It's one of 27 in the country. They are on their way to New York to help in those search and rescue efforts as we speak. Joe, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. The American Red Cross has just called our newsroom, and they are asking us to tell everybody out there, if you're thinking about donating blood, to please wait until tomorrow. Obviously, they themselves are overwhelmed with what's going on today. They will have the people in place tomorrow. If, in fact, you choose to donate blood, the best time to do it is tomorrow. Amtrak has suspended service up and down the Northeast Corridor, and we are being told that the pilot on board the American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed this morning into one of the towers, is being identified as John Boganowski from Dracut up in the North Shore here in Massachusetts. We, of course, will continue to follow these developments as they affect Boston, Massachusetts, and New England. We'll stay on top of this story. We'll bring you developments throughout the day. For now, let's go back to Dan Rather and the CBS Network.
Bin Laden. So that message has gone out again. I'm sure that we've insisted that they give us any cooperation that they might be able to, and we've asked that of our allies and other countries around the world. Part of that will be intelligence sharing, and part of that would be deploying of resources.
RP-80, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
James Kelson, who was formerly head of the New York City FBI office and was the assistant director of the FBI, and is on the, not just on the telephone, he's with us now, former director of the FBI office in New York. Jim, it's good to see you again. Put this in context and perspective for us, and let our viewers and listeners know you were in charge of the investigation of the TWA-800 crash investigation, have a lot of experience with this kind of thing. Give us some context.
Dan, it's a huge event. It's a black day. In my view, it's a bigger event than Pearl Harbor. It's war. It's declared war, and we need to now pull together as a nation and accomplish a bunch of things.
Well, nearly everybody's been talking today about the FBI's role, and obviously the FBI has a large role, but the FBI alone cannot possibly investigate something such as this. What other agencies, what other resources the U.S. government pulled in to find out who's responsible for this?
Well, all the intelligence agencies, the CIA, NSA, law enforcement at every level, I mean, work together on a daily basis as a team now. The idea, though, that we can know everything, and obviously we didn't know everything. When I say we, I'm talking about that team that I used to be a part of. This event happened, so we did not stop it from happening. It's terribly difficult in a free society with open borders and On any given day, people land at Kennedy Airport and other gateways undocumented. It's very difficult, and particularly with Middle East terrorism, these cells are not joined together. The only thing that joins them together is their hatred for us, our way of life, our foreign policy.
But Jim Kellstrom, you say that these various terrorist organizations are not necessarily as well connected as we sometimes might imagine them to be. Give us some perspective on who among the world's states helps them with what they do. I'm not suggesting that we know anything about who did this today, but the questions just tumble out. Well, can someone do this without some state support from someone like Iraq or Iran?
Well, you know, Dan, whether or not this is state supported, there has been state support over the years, and you know, if this was 1% or 10% or 100% state supported, I don't know. I'm a civilian now. I'm sure that the FBI and the agency and all the other intelligence apparatus of the free world, for that matter, is trying to figure out exactly who's behind this, and we need to act with massive power, in my view, without a lot of collateral damage, and that's difficult to do. But this is an act of war, and we need to act accordingly. Now is the time to step up to the plate and do the things that we need to do here as a country.
Jim Kellstrom, when you were still active with the FBI, true or untrue, that there were a number of terrorist acts in which the threads of evidence led back to certain states, but that for reasons, perhaps understandable reasons of diplomacy and what we call geopolitics, there was a tendency to say, well, we may know that, but we don't want to deal with it. True or untrue? No, I think that's true, Dan. I think that obviously there has to be balance in actions that we take. I mean, these events look very clear once they happen. I mean, now that this horrific act has happened, and then we have untold dead people in New York and Washington and some airplane in Pittsburgh, it's crystal clear that we need massive, effective, high morale law enforcement intelligence. We need to act as a unified country. We need to stop the hypocrisy. Not that hypocrisy got us to this day. I'm not saying it did. But this is serious business. And those of us in law enforcement over the years, and intelligence work over the years, didn't know what day this would happen, hoped it would never happen, but thought surely someday it might happen. I mean, we saw the World Trade Center bombing. We saw in the United States. Then we saw events, the Blind Sheikh going to blow up the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, the United Nations building, the FBI building. We saw Ramzi Youssef plot in the Philippines, well, after he escaped the United States, to blow up 9 or 10 jumbo jets simultaneously. We saw the bombing of the Cole. We saw the bombing of the barracks in Saudi Arabia. We saw the bombing of our embassies in Africa. There's plenty of evidence that people hate us for who we are, what our foreign policy is. And we need to act. And we need to act together as a country. James Kellstrom, formerly head of the FBI office in New York and a man who helped run the FBI for a long while. Thanks for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Rulers of the Taliban have rejected all suggestions that Osama bin Laden could be behind these attacks. We mentioned earlier that some leaders of the Taliban got out early to disassociate themselves from this whole thing. And the background of this is that by last reports, Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan. There's been some pressure to get him out of there. The Taliban is responding today. The Taliban condemned the attacks, and they said that bin Laden had nothing to do with it. Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, is speaking. We go to him live.
The utter carnage and terror which has engulfed so many innocent people. We've offered President Bush and the American people our solidarity, our profound sympathy, and our prayers. But it is plain that citizens of many countries around the world, including Britain, will have been caught up in this terror. I have just chaired an emergency meeting of the British Government Civil Contingencies Committee, and I would like to explain some of the measures that we have agreed to take here. There are a range of precautionary measures. We have stepped up security at airports to the highest levels. No flights will take off from the United Kingdom for which we cannot apply the highest standards of security for aircrew and passengers. Private flights have been stopped except where specifically authorized. Flight paths into London have been changed so there will be no civil overflights of central London. Security has been increased across the full range of government buildings and military premises. The police across the whole of the UK are on full alert. All our defence facilities around the world have been moved to high alert to ensure the protection of British service personnel. Advice has been given to major financial and business institutions about appropriate security measures. A number of other security measures have been taken, and of course we are in close touch with US, European and other allies and are cooperating with them on issues of security. All relevant ministers remain in communication, and the committee, the Civil Contingencies Committee, will meet again tomorrow at 8 a.m. Obviously, some of these measures, not least the effect upon airports, will lead to some disruption, and I hope people understand that. But other than the specific measures we have taken, or that we have advised others to take, business and everyday life can continue as normal. As for those that carried out these attacks, there are no adequate words of condemnation. Their barbarism will stand as their shame for all eternity. As I said earlier, this mass terrorism is the new evil in our world. The people who perpetrate it have no regard whatever for the sanctity or value of human life. And we, the democracies of the world, must come together to defeat it and eradicate it. This is not a battle between the United States of America and terrorism, but between the free and democratic world and terrorism. We therefore here in Britain stand shoulder to shoulder with our American friends in this hour of tragedy, and we, like them, will not rest until this evil is driven from our world.
Live from Great Britain, Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, with his response and comments on what had happened today in one of the most horrifying attacks ever on U.S. soil. Terrorists crashed 2 airliners into the World Trade Centers today. This is a photograph taken at the time of one of the planes. American Airlines says it was one of their commercial airliners, crashes into one of the towers. This was around 9 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, about 5 hours ago. Another plane crashed into another tower. One of the towers began collapsing. The hope was that it would only be a partial collapse. It turned out to be a total collapse. Debris, including concrete and steel, raining down on a wide area around that building. And then incredibly, almost unbelievably, a short time later, the other tower began to creak and wobble and then collapse. Other buildings in the vicinity, as reported by Mayor Rudolph Giuliani in a live television report to CBS News a short while ago, also began to collapse. This was the scene just after the collapse of the buildings, New York City high school students being evacuated. Teachers and others counseling them, be careful as you flee. At the World Trade Centers, some people jumped, were forced out of windows at high up. 110 stories were those buildings. This was the scene. Horrified spectators cried aloud as they saw one after another persons jumping or forced out of the building. There were secondary then third explosions, and then a fourth explosion. Apparently, no one knows for sure. From the high-octane fuel and other causes in the interior of the building brought about by the crash of the two planes into the World Trade Centers. 4 aircraft, commercial aircraft, were hijacked during the day. 2 of them crashed into the World Trade Center buildings. Another apparently crashed into the Pentagon, where there has been some loss of life, how much we do not know, and there have been some injuries. And then another plane is believed, this has never been completely, totally confirmed, in the area of Camp David, the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland. FBI officials reported earlier that a plane had crashed in that vicinity, but it's been a confused reporting situation about that since then. And then in western Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area, there was a big plane crash there, details of which are still being sorted out. That was a crash in Somerset, Pennsylvania. So the North World Trade Center tower was hit, then the South Tower hit, both collapsed. Plane crashed at the Pentagon, plane crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and one may, I underscore the word, have crashed in the vicinity of Camp David, Maryland. This is perhaps the most audacious terrorist attack that's ever taken place in the world. The most audacious terrorist attack ever taken place in the world, according to Chris Yates, an aviation expert with Janes in London. And he said it takes a logistics operation from the terror group involved that is second to none. He went on to say that only a very small handful of terrorist groups is on that list, and he names at the top of the list Osama bin Laden. That's quote unquote for Mr. Yates. However, we keep emphasizing no one knows who's responsible for what happened today. And you may want to note that on previous occasions, first reports about who is responsible for what turned out to be erroneous. It will be many hours, perhaps days and weeks, before it can be sorted out who, in fact, is responsible for these actions today. John Roberts is at our Washington Bureau. John?
Well, Dan, let's first of all speak to the issue of whether there was or there was not any kind of a crash in the Camp David area. I spoke with Secret Service sources just a few minutes ago, Dan, who say that they have no evidence that there was any kind of a crash or an explosion or fire or anything near Camp David in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland. They say that there was this aircraft that went down in the Pittsburgh area, which is still some distance from Camp David, but there was nothing, at least, probably I would think within a number of miles radius of Camp David, and nothing to suggest that Camp David may have been specifically targeted either. However, they do not know at this point where that aircraft that crashed in Pittsburgh was headed, whether it was indeed headed to Pittsburgh, whether it might have been trying to overfly the northern area of Maryland near Camp David. Perhaps it might have been headed for downtown Washington, D.C. as well, because there, of course, is that other aircraft that crashed into the Pentagon. And there appeared to be, at least from my perspective, Dan, upon arrival at the White House this morning, that when that aircraft went into the Pentagon, what had been a fairly mild state of alarm at the White House suddenly went to an enormously high state of alert. They evacuated the building within 5 minutes, and they cordoned off a number of blocks around the White House, not letting anyone back in. And as well, they evacuated the vice president and his staff. He is in charge of the Situation Room right now, off campus, not at the White House, though by all accounts still in Washington, D.C. He is there with his national security advisor and his chief of staff at his side. Lynn Cheney, his wife, also said to be in the same area as the vice president. But Dan, a development within the last 45 minutes that I certainly don't want to begin to appear to speculate on, but we understand, Dan, that the congressional leadership this morning, after the attacks, was taken from Capitol Hill. They were taken to a secure location for a while under the protection of the Capitol Hill police, and then they dispersed and were operating out of private offices. Well, CBS News has learned from congressional sources just recently that the leadership of Congress, the congressional leadership, has been gathered together and is being ferried by helicopter individually, not together, individually, to a location outside of Washington, D.C.
Now, of course, the big area that has been designated for Congress to go to in the event of a big national emergency, war, nuclear attack, is Weather Mountain in the western part of Virginia, Dan, but we can't say that that's where they've been taken. President Bush, after leaving Sarasota, Florida today, went to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he made his first statement after receiving a full debriefing of what had taken place in New York and Washington. Here's what the president had to say.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
Strong words this morning from President Bush, or this afternoon from President Bush at Barksdale Air Force Base, where Air Force One touched down after the president left Sarasota, Florida, where he'd been holding an education event earlier today. Those strong words backed up not too long ago by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who said, "This barbarism will stand as their shame for all eternity," speaking of the people who perpetrated this act. He also went on to say, Prime Minister Blair of Britain, "This is not a battle between the United States and terrorism, but between the free world and terrorism," and that Britain will stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States. Now, shortly after President Bush made that statement, Air Force One took off from Barksdale Air Force Base. Destination unknown, but something curious and unusual happened just prior to Air Force One's departure. The normal, what's called tight pool that follows the president around, usually neighboring in the area between 13 and 14 people, was whittled down to 5 people. There were a number of people from the media who were left behind at Barksdale Air Force Base, which may be a suggestion that Air Force One is not headed back for Washington, because there would be no reason to leave those people if indeed it were headed back to Andrews Air Force Base, but that indeed Air Force One may be headed for another location. At this point, the president is being kept under tight wraps. No one is talking about his destination or his whereabouts, though we do understand that the vice president is still in Washington, D.C. But again, to reiterate, a change with the leadership of Congress. They have been gathered together and are being helicoptered, ferried individually out of Washington, D.C. to an undisclosed location. And again, as far as any explosion near Camp David, Dan, the Secret Service saying that they have no information about that. It doesn't appear to have happened. Dan? Roberts, we know that Vice President Dick Cheney is in charge in the White House Situation Room with able assistance from Condoleezza Rice of the National Security Council. Do you know who is with President Bush? Who would be the expert, if you will, helping President Bush as he is in transit from Florida to Shreveport, Louisiana, and then to wherever else he's going?
Well, Dan, when the president left for this trip to Florida, it really was more of a political and an issues trip. So he took his top advisors. Karl Rove was with him. Karen Hughes is with him, as are many of his top political and issue advisors. General Powell was in South America. He is headed back to Washington. Condoleezza Rice stayed here. I do not know if Stephen Hadley, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor, might have been traveling with the president. But, Dan, as it was just a quick overnight to Florida, there's no reason for Mr. Hadley to be there. So it may be that the president does not have one of his senior national security staff with him. There's probably a minor staff member. But certainly, Dan, they are doing everything they possibly can to hustle out to the president all of the expertise that he would need. But certainly, Dan, his closest cadre of advisors have been with him since he left on Monday afternoon.
Our White House correspondent John Roberts in Washington. We go to Scott Pelley in downtown on the tip of Manhattan, where the Twin Towers collapsed. Scott?
Dan, I'm just a block from one of the World Trade Center buildings. There's another large building that's a short distance from where the aircraft impacted. It is burning above me now. There are flames shooting out of several stories of this building. Firefighters have told us there is some concern that the building might collapse because apparently the opposite face of the building has been blown away. There is towering black smoke, as you've seen from your live cameras, still rising over the tip of Manhattan. I just spoke a moment ago with some firefighters from the 3rd Aviation Battalion out of the Bronx. They told me they got here right after the first airplane impacted. They were getting their tools off their truck when the building began to collapse, and they described diving into a subway station and hearing all of the World Trade Center tower falling all around them. Apparently their tools are still buried under the rubble, and one of the firefighters said that if the subway station had not been right there, they would certainly all be dead. They also described from the center of this scene a New York City police lieutenant who was telling them to be careful to get back, and as he was waving his arms in the air, a piece of debris apparently fell from the World Trade Center building and severely wounded this officer who was trying to help the firefighters stay safe. Dan, I'm at the corner of West Broadway and Murray Street, and it is an unbelievable scene here. There are huge drips of paper. This is all the office paper that was so carefully filed in all the hundreds and hundreds of offices in the World Trade Center. It's now scattered everywhere, drifting around like snow. I've seen letters from law schools. I've seen Christmas cards, all kinds of correspondence.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim Kerrigan here in the WBZ4 newsroom, where we continue to update you on how these horrific acts today are affecting us right here in the Bay State. Let's update you on a couple of things. You'll remember, or you've heard, that this all began this morning really at Logan Airport, which, by the way, is still closed and will remain that way indefinitely. This morning, American Airlines Flight 11 left Logan Airport. It was bound for Los Angeles. There were 81 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 9 crew members. That plane crashed into the World Trade Center just after the 9 o'clock hour. United Airlines Flight 175, also destined for Los Angeles, 56 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 7 crew members. That flight 175, also destined for Los Angeles, 56 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 7 crew members. That flight has crashed. That has been confirmed. However, the location of that crash has not been confirmed by United Airlines or by the FAA. Emergency services, of course, have been set up here in the Boston area for families directly affected by these 2 planes crashing. Our own Casey Kaufman joins us now. She's at the Hyatt here in Boston. And Casey, give us the latest on what's being done for these families.
Well, let me first tell you, Kim, that as part of their emergency plan, Massport has to open a media briefing room, and they have done that. We are now in the Hyatt Hotel, where they are going to be holding another press briefing in about 20 minutes from now. They last held their press briefing at around 11:30 this morning. This press briefing room will be open to any federal or state agency that wishes wishes to talk to us. Now, to put it in framework and to repeat a couple of things that you had just said, the American Airlines Flight 11 that was bound for Los Angeles from Boston left here at Logan Airport this morning, according to Massport officials, at 8:59. And rather at 7:59, there were 92 passengers and a Boston-based crew aboard. It was hijacked. It crashed into the tower at the World Trade Center, as we know, and that happened at around 9 o'clock this morning. Captain John Oganowski of Dracut, we understand, was the pilot of the jetliner. Oganowski was a Lowell native. He was a 1971 graduate of Lowell Tech, and he was also a Vietnam veteran. He apparently flew transport jets in Vietnam. Another flight from Boston from United Airlines, this one with 175 passengers on board, with rather 56 passengers aboard. It was flight number 175. It was bound also for Los Angeles, and as you mentioned, it is a confirmed crash, although officials are not telling us at this moment exactly where it crashed. There was also another American Airlines jet, number 77, from Dulles to Los Angeles with 58 people on board, also hijacked, and initially we understood that that may have been the second plane involved in the crash of the second tower at the World Trade Center. And then there is another United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco with 38 passengers, and apparently that crashed outside of Pittsburgh. As for Logan Airport, it remains closed. Security has been beefed up here at the airport. Construction sites adjacent and nearby have been stopped, and most important, a family assistance area for family of the passengers of both the American Airlines flight and United Flight 175 has been set up at the Hilton Hotel. We understand that family members are already there, along with counselors and trained professionals, and I know that we have been mentioning the telephone numbers on the screen throughout our coverage. That area, of course, is restricted to the press. It's closed to the press. I would assume that when Massport briefs reporters in about 10 or 15 minutes from now, we'll be asking them about what's going on at that location. We respect the family's privacy, and obviously our hearts go out to all the people who may be receiving news, terrible news right now on this very historic and terrible day. So we'll be asking the Massport officials about what's going on in the Family Assistance Center at the other hotel, exactly how many people have gathered there. We asked them before at 11:30 when there was a press briefing to give us details of how many people were aboard the American Airlines flight from Boston, the flight number 11, as well as the United Airlines flight. They talked a little bit more about the American Airlines flight, but at that point at 11:30 they were not even confirming or denying anything about a Boston flight that was United Airlines flight. So this is unfolding, a developing story. We will be having the very latest whenever there's a press briefing, and we'll be bringing it to you live, reporting live. I'm Casey Kaufman. Kim.
Story that will continue to unfold, no doubt, for days and weeks yet to come. Again, as we mentioned there, Casey said there is telephone numbers available for families, and those telephone numbers are running on the bottom of your screen, so you'll want to keep an eye out for those. We also have a number of closings in the area and cancellations. We're running those at the bottom of the screen. We won't run through the list for you. We'll just ask that you keep an eye on the bottom of the screen for that information as well. Some of the other ways that we're being affected here in the Bay State, the National Park Service is closing down all of the sites in the area. That includes the USS Constitution as well as the Bunker Hill Monument. And of course, non-essential employees, both for the state and for the city, have been sent home, all being asked to get out of the city of Boston and to stay out of the city today. Let's go to Robin Hamilton. She's in Back Bay, where workers there have been a bit nervous, have they not, Robin?
That's exactly right, Kim. Well, two of the most prominent buildings of the city, have been closed, the Hancock and the Prudential Center. Now, behind me, there is a little bit of activity on the streets, but nowhere near the usual amount of bustling activity that there is on any given day. On this day, they have lowered the flag to half staff out of respect to the tragedy that happened this morning. It's on the minds of so many people. Earlier this morning, hundreds of people left voluntarily from the Prudential Center. They later issued a mandatory evacuation. It was the same for the 6 buildings, the 6 John Hancock buildings, where 12,000 employees were evacuated. Now, there's no question that after all of this today, many people are extremely scared and sad, and we had a chance to speak to one person today, and these were his thoughts.
I was almost playing a joke on us, and then we got confirmation on the radio, and we took it extremely seriously because we're hanging off the Prudential, and so we called everybody off of the building because we knew it was a life-threatening situation because the plane had actually driven by us, the second plane this morning that had left Logan, so that scares us a lot.
The plane that left Logan, you saw it?
Well, we had to have because we're off the 50-story building, and they go by us every day, so it had to have gone by us because if it was heading to New York, it flew right behind us.
There have been some other buildings that have been closing around me. Behind me, the Heinz Convention Center, there were several conferences going on. Those have since closed, and other buildings, again, have closed and they've encouraged all their employees to leave and just take the day off. Other people we've talked to, it's almost eerie because we actually spoke with one woman a little earlier today who said one of her co-workers' husband was on that flight leaving from Boston, going to Los Angeles. So she was just devastated as she was leaving, going home. So the mood here is extremely sad and very tense. Back to you, Kim.
All right, Robin, thank you. That's the part of this, I guess, none of us really understands at this point, how many of us will be directly affected, whether it's from here in the Boston area or someone we might know in New York City or in Washington. Well, Governor Jane Swift has been actively involved in the situation today. She held a press conference about an hour and a half ago from Framingham, and she had these comments to make. Let's listen in.
Let me just say, first and foremost, that I join with all Americans in being shocked and saddened with the events that have happened this morning to Massachusetts families and citizens who may have lost their life in these terrorist attacks. I am saddened, and I express my deepest sympathy to those families. We have taken all prudent and necessary steps in Massachusetts to make sure that the families of the Commonwealth are protected and that they're safe. We have not received any specific threats against any Massachusetts citizens or any Massachusetts places or structures, and we continue to feel confident and comfortable that the public and the citizens of Massachusetts are secure. And
the governor did mention this morning is that the 9th District congressional race, the primary there, is, of course, going on today, and that is continuing. She is urging all voters in that district to get out, go to the polls. The polls, she is assuring everyone, are very safe and asking everyone to get out and exercise their right to vote today. Joe Shortsleeve joins us now from the studio. And, Joe, you have more on that American Airlines flight that left Boston this morning.
Yeah, Kim, I wanted to tell you about a conversation I had with a source very familiar with American Airlines Flight 11, which left Boston this morning. The source told me that this flight is Boston-based, and what that means is obviously we've been hearing that John Oganowski, the pilot, is from the North Shore in Drake. But what this means is that all the attendants on that flight, the 9 flight attendants, the pilot and co-pilot, were also from the Boston area. The source told me that they believe that the flight attendants, some of them may have lived down in Cape Cod, but they are all local people, and that's the very sad news that we're learning at this hour. Oganowski, I was told by the source, is a superb pilot. His wife, Peggy, is a flight attendant for American Airlines. They have 3 daughters. They live on the North Shore in Drake. In addition to that, the source told me that Oganowski would never, ever have deliberately flown the plane into the World Trade Center. Now, we don't know what happened this morning, but as it relates to the training of American Airlines pilots, I was told this morning that what happens in a case like this, what they're trained for in a case like this, is that if there were terrorists on board and that they at some point stood up and stormed the cockpit, what would happen at that point is that a flight attendant would pick up a phone, say something to the pilot would know the code, the pilot would then start a recording system which would eventually record everything that was going on in the cockpit. Now, this source also told me that they just simply believe that Ogonowski must have been killed early on because it's the only way to explain what had happened here. The source told me that they would never fly the plane directly into the World Trade Center. They're trained at that point to accept the fact that perhaps their life is over and that the plane would have to be ditched in the ocean. Chilling information from folks local in our neighborhood, very close to Flight 11. We're being told that they are all Boston-based from the Boston area, Kim.
All right, Joe, this is such a difficult thing, and questions here that may never be answered for any of us, especially because tape recordings, like you were mentioned, may very well be destroyed there in the World Trade Center and all the rubble there. We want to give you some last-minute updates here before we go back to the network. Red Cross is asking for blood donations. However, they're asking you to wait until tomorrow for those blood donations. They are not set up today and prepared in the area to collect the blood that's needed. This blood, of course, being shipped down to New York City. And also, again, reminding you, 9th District primary elections are continuing. You're urged to get out to the polls and cast your votes. And finally, Massport is planning another press conference. That press conference will probably be coming up in the next 10 minutes or so. We will have that for you coming up live when it happens. Let's go back to CBS coverage of this tragic day and stay with us right here on WBZ4.
To a friend she knew down in security, and he confirmed that, and they told us to stay put, not to leave yet. A few minutes later, we were told it was okay to start going down the stairs, and we all, it was about 45 of us. We waited till everybody got out, and then we started down the stairs, and there was not that much smoke in the stairways, and we all had wet rags and kept it in front of our face. And when we got out into the stairs, people were coming down from the 70th and 80th floors, and later on we saw some injured people. People would yell down, "Stay to your right," and people that had burns and some were cut up or whatever. We went down first, and also some pregnant women shut down. Everybody was very helpful and orderly in the stairs, and then we started seeing firemen after we got down to the, I think, third. Firemen were coming up, walking up, carrying equipment, and at one floor, people were passing out bottles of water from a water machine so we could, pour the water on our heads and keep the rags wet. And the smoke was not that bad, We were able to get down slowly, and I think it was 10 o'clock when I got out of the building, and that's when some debris fell down, and I was across the street, and we ran down into like a subway entrance. At that point, I became covered with the soot and the ash and everything. And then I just walked up north as far as I could, up Broadway. My sister works at Spring Street in the Village, and I went to her office. She wasn't at work, but the people in the office helped me clean up, and then I walked across the Williamsburg Bridge and came to my sister's house in Greenpoint. And I was able to contact my wife and children, let them know I was okay, and friends. It was horrible. It was unbelievable. I cannot fathom that the buildings collapsed. I can't.
John Serra.
Yes.
Eyewitness who was on the 47th floor of one of the World Trade Center buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your moving eyewitness account. We go to Los Angeles. Brian Jenkins of the RAND Corporation, one of the world's ranking experts on terrorism. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for being with us. This is unprecedented today. Give us some context for it.
It is unprecedented in terms of the enormity of scale of this attack. It has long been feared by those who analyze terrorism, who look at these things, that we could see a major attack on U.S. soil. And certainly there have been many scenarios that have been tested in the various exercises that have been conducted in cities across the United States. But there is nothing in the exercises that prepares you for the stunning images that we have seen today that will take us years to digest.
Mr. Jenkins, there's never been a similar occasion, but on other occasions there's been a lot of conclusion jumping, and a lot of the conclusion jumping, a similar occasion, but on other occasions there's been a lot of conclusion jumping, and a lot of the conclusion jumping has been wrong. Now, there is a sort of center of gravity building around the belief that this is the work somehow, some way, of Osama bin Laden and his organization. Give us some perspective on that.
Certainly, the Osama bin Laden organization would have to be included in any short list of suspects, but it is really too early to jump to any conclusions. Keep in mind that it has been less than 6 hours since the first attack. Now, clearly, in terms of the enormity of the attack, the kind of an organization that would be required, the resources that would be required to carry this out, the style of the attack, that is consistent with some of the modus operandi that we've seen come out of the Middle East in the past. But let's wait for the evidence to take us to the conclusion as to who is responsible. Right now we know what has happened. It will take some hours, some days, potentially even some weeks to figure out who did it and exactly why they did it, if they needed a why.
Brian Jenkins in Los Angeles from the RAND Corporation. Scott Pelley is in Lower Manhattan. Scott?
Dan, thank you, Officer. Dan, I've made it down nearly to the base of the World Trade Center. I can see the building here. It is... Dan, it's very difficult to describe. What I see left of one of the World Trade Center towers looks to be about 10 or 15 stories tall. There is black smoke rising over the hulk, the sun behind it. Police officers are moving. The smoke is coming out. There's a building there are two buildings next to the World Trade Center. Both of them are involved in fire. There's fire shooting out of the windows of those two buildings. Large pieces of glass and pieces of these buildings to the street. Dan, the scene here on West Broadway is astonishing. New York City traffic was stopped and incinerated right here in the street. I see a number of New York City police cars that were obviously the first responders to the catastrophe that have been blasted to pieces, thrown over on their sides, and burned. There are a number of U.S. postal vehicles in the street that have literally, Dan, just melted. U.S. postal trucks that have melted in the street. There is a large bus, could be a city bus, might be a kind of a Greyhound bus. Impossible to tell because it has been completely burned away, and is sitting just in the middle of West Broadway. As I reported to you earlier, the street is thick with several inches of muck that is made of construction material and files and paperwork, all sorts of things that were in the World Trade Center building. But, Dan, the site of the building itself, the site of the World Trade Center tower that I can see here is a hulk about 15
Good afternoon,
stories
everyone. I'm Kim
tall.
Kerrigan here in the WBZ4 newsroom. We want to update you now. This is a press conference taking place from Massport. Let's listen in.
Can you hear me now?
This is Joe Lawless
Test.
from
1, 2, 3.
Massport,
Can you hear me?
and again, he's about to update us on the situation at Logan Airport.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lawless. I'm the Director of Public Safety of the Massachusetts Port Authority. I want to talk a little about what's going on currently here at Logan Airport. Our top priorities, first and foremost, are the families, the needs of those families, and the safety and security of everyone who works and travels through this airport. We have set up a family assistance center at the Hilton Hotel to receive families who had victims on those two aircraft that we'll talk about later on. At the Family Assistance Center, Massport is working in conjunction with the American Red Cross to provide spiritual, emotional care to those families. There's also a presence of the airlines, clergy, and emergency medical support. Again, I'm going to ask the assistance, and I want to thank you for your assistance of the media for publicizing those numbers that we've put up for families to call. Again, the Massport number is area code 617-568-3100. The American Airlines number is 800-245-0999. And United Airlines, 800-932-8555. And those numbers are for family members who may think they have had loved ones on board those aircraft. Currently, we're urging all people within the airport to leave the airport until further notice. The airport will remain closed until we receive some directives from the FAA, and we feel that we can reopen the airport. We feel it's in the best interest of public safety for those passengers to leave right now. For people who don't live in the Boston area and can't get accommodations, Massport is taking care of those stranded passengers, and we're going to be providing food and assistance, cots for those people at one of our facilities in South Boston on the Fish Pier. As of between the hours of 7 and 9 a.m. this morning, there are approximately 220 aircraft movements at Logan Airport. 106 of those were departures, 114 were arrivals. And there are only 2 aircraft that have not been accounted for. That's number 1, American Airlines, flight number 11, departed Boston at 7:59 en route to Los Angeles. And the best information available to us right now, there were 81 passengers on board and 11 crew members. Shortly thereafter at 8:14 a.m., United Airlines, flight number 175, departed Boston, 8:14, 56 passengers and 9 crew members. And that was en route to LA as well. So I just want to, again, reassert our priorities. Our priorities are to provide for the needs of families and to make sure we have a safe and secure airport for our employees and everyone using our airport. I'll take a few questions. It's a system that we have in place where there are various security responsibilities shared by the airport and by the air carriers under the direction of the FAA. The actual operation of the security checkpoint is an airline responsibility.
Any possibility that alleged hijackers got on board the airplane from outside the terminal, from the tarmac or from an outside ramp?
So it's an investigation that's ongoing right now. We're working with the FBI. The FBI is the lead agency investigating this right now. Massport, the Massachusetts State Police are working closely with the FBI to make a determination on the investigation.
When was the airport aware that, in fact, hijackings had occurred? Were they aware that hijackings had occurred prior to the planes actually being driven into the World Trade Center? Or when exactly was Massport aware, or were authorities aware that these planes were hijacked?
The airport was not made aware of any hijacking.
At any time?
In this short period of time you're talking about, no.
Was the airport aware, Joe, that the planes had veered off, forced it off?
No, the airport was not.
When was the last time that Massport conducted a full security check of all terminals?
We're constantly evaluating our systems, our security systems, looking at them on a regular basis.
You ever recently had any cause for concern that there may be some security issues?
No, I want to say that we have a very high security standard here. We consider ourselves as secure, if not more secure, than any other airport in the United States.
Obviously, you have to be stunned by this like everybody else. Your reaction, we work so hard to secure airport passengers and
I'm shocked like everyone else is.
Do you know whether it was these 2 planes which hit the World Trade Center, or do you
know where these planes went down if they didn't?
Based upon the information we have at hand, we believe they were involved in the incident at the World Trade Center. Based upon the information that we have right now.
Do you know of any airlines being under any unusual security alerts in the past couple of weeks?
No, I really can't discuss anything that may be relevant to the investigation.
Were the airplanes in touch with Traycon or any other facility on the way out? We know about that. Was it a normal departure in the immediate off?
Again, based on the knowledge that I have right now available to me, everything seemed normal when they left Logan.
Joe, are both flight crews out of Boston? I know we've been told that Flight 11 and 9 flight crews, the flight attendants from Boston.
I don't know about the American Airlines. I mean, excuse me. I'm not sure about the base of the United Airlines crew. I believe there were members of the American crew that were from Boston area.
Do you know if both those flights, the American and United, originated in Boston?
Were the planes here this morning?
Were the planes here overnight? Did the flights start here or they were coming?
I believe they were overnight. I don't have that information, but I do believe they're here overnight.
And where did they arrive from?
I don't have that information. Well, I can't really go into what our security measures are, but we always keep a high level of security here at Logan Airport.
Who's in charge of the security for the ground personnel at is that airlines or is that the airport? People who screens the ground personnel, the baggage handlers, things like that.
That's an area that the ground handlers work for the airline. We're not sure right now. We're in close communication with the FBI and the FAA in Massport. We'll be making a determination at some point in time, but right now, until further notice, the airport's going to remain closed.
Where is the investigation? Have you started gathering people that were here this morning? Have you segregated them, separated them? Where do you stand?
I can only just mention briefly, since we're not doing the investigation, the FBI, along with the state police, are doing the investigation. Just like any other investigation, they'd pull potential witnesses in and speak to those witnesses.
Have you taken those people before you close the airport and you have people already?
Yeah, the investigation is well underway.
Why should you close the terminals after leaving, or after most of the personnel out?
We made an immediate decision to close the security checkpoints and move people out beyond the security checkpoints. When it was determined that the airport would be closed indefinitely, then we made the decision to urge people to leave the airport.
Joe, at what point does Boston Tower turn over the aircraft?
That's an FAA issue. I don't have specifics on that. No, I can tell you it goes from Boston Tower to Boston Center location, then it goes to another location after that. Again, I don't have the information on that.
A short while ago, a military airplane was spotted flying over this airport. Are there military flights going in and out now with investigators, or what is the purpose of those flights?
The airport's closed right now, except for a special request. We haven't had any military aircraft land at Logan. Again, if it is, it's being handled by another agency.
Do you know why an F-15 would have flown over this airport about 20 minutes ago?
No.
Where were the flights that were stranded in the air when the airport was shut down? Where have they been diverted?
All the flights that were diverted, they have gone to other airports. I don't have a list of which airports they went to.
In this country or in Canada?
I believe a combination of both. I can't say that for sure, though.
How likely is it that there was a security breach at this airport?
Again, I can't comment on that. The investigation is underway.
Joe, you keep, in this interface between the airlines and Massport on the checkpoint, does somebody keep records on incidents where people have are arrested or things are confiscated so there's a recent way of tracking recent security breaches or efforts to breach security?
Yeah, we meet all the requirements that are required by us, the FAA, when it comes to responding to security checkpoints, maintaining records, and so forth.
So are those records public or confiscated so there's a recent way of tracking recent security breaches
And we meet all the requirements that are required by us, the FAA, when it comes to responding to security checkpoints, maintaining records, and so forth.
Are those records public?
No, they're not public records.
Are you aware that you increased the number of people trying to prove security, making efforts to prove security?
I'd rather not discuss that at this point in time. There's an active investigation going on, and I wouldn't want to say anything that would endanger that investigation.
Joe, about how many people have made their way over to the Family Assistance Program right now?
We have about a dozen people, numerous families over there right now who are there for information. We're providing spiritual, emotional care for those people in conjunction with the Red Cross and the airlines.
How long will it take to specifically confirm the names of the passengers?
That's an issue for law enforcement in the airlines. They're the holders of the information right now. I would say not. I haven't checked the specifics on that. I'd say no, they have not. They did not. It's a decision that Massport, in conjunction with the FAA, will make at some point in time. No idea.
Were passengers or baggage from the canceled flights that were on the tarmac, were they checked at all that part of their planes or the baggage was being taken back off?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know the name of the company that employs the people who work at the checkpoints?
We have several companies that operate security checkpoints for the airlines here in Boston.
At American?
At American, Globe Security.
Globe?
Yes.
And at the United Terminal?
I believe that's Huntley Security. Huntley.
Local firm?
They have local representation here.
What was the size of the aircraft?
Both aircraft were 767s. The total seating capacity is approximately 204 on a 767.
If there's something like this happens, it's customary to review recent records to see if anything unusual was spotted. Can you tell us anything past that weeks raised?
No, all I can tell you right now is the investigation is ongoing, and we're going to be combing through every event that may have occurred here and elsewhere. I can't disclose that right now. No, I don't have that information.
What about airport workers? Are they all free to go, or are you detaining any for questioning?
Airport workers are free to leave.
Hey guys, thank you very much. We have more information. We're going to come back. Right now it's very limited.
You've been watching Joe Lawless of Massport, a news conference there. He says that, of course, Massport today, their first priority, families and employees there at the airport. He also tells us that they are asking now everyone at Logan Airport to please leave. The airport is closed indefinitely. They're asking employees as well as potential passengers to please leave Logan Airport. Lisa Hughes is in New York City today on other business. And she joins us now. Lisa, I know that you've had a chance to report with us already, but maybe some of our viewers didn't see you. Update us on exactly what you saw and how the events unfolded before your eyes.
Kim, we left Logan Airport this morning at about 7:20. Joyce Kulhawick and I were on one of the Delta shuttles, and actually one of the Delta workers suggested that we take an earlier flight because it looked like some of the flights at Logan were actually going to be delayed. We arrived at LaGuardia probably about 8:40, and about 8:50 we left the airport, and within minutes we could actually see a cloud of very black smoke coming from the city, and you could follow that cloud of black smoke right to the first of the two trade towers. Within about 15 minutes, the second of the two towers had been hit by that second plane, and it took us quite a while to get into the city, but we did get here up on the Upper West Side, which is about 3 miles from where those towers were. And
And if you look just over my shoulder, you can still see what is a very dark cloud of smoke. This has been covering the city at times, different parts of the day. And some of the eyewitnesses who were actually down there described day literally turning into night. There was so much ash or paper or debris raining down on them. So it is still really a chaotic scene here. You hear the emergency vehicles coming up to this more northern part of the city, going to some of the hospitals. And you also hear what is a very eerie sound, the F-15 going over the city. That's for security purposes. But because you know that the airspaces here are closed, it really is an eerie sound to hear that plane before you see it, Kim.
Lisa, are you guys being affected there? I know you're on West 57th Street. Are you being affected, you know, the power, the telephone lines, all those essential things? Are they being affected?
They have been. In particular here at the CBS affiliate, WCBS, and different parts of the network, some of the microwave links that are connected with the lower parts of the city are being knocked out intermittently. The emergency officials here are just telling people to stay off the phones because they are afraid of that kind of flooding of the lines. They're also concerned, obviously, about transportation in the city. The subways were backed up for hours today. Obviously, there is no air traffic, and there is a kind of quiet, at least here on the Upper West Side, with respect to car traffic that you don't typically see on a weekday. So it does appear to some extent that people are heeding some of these requests to stay off the streets and to stay off the phones.
All right, Lisa Hughes reporting from New York City. Thank you very much. We'll continue to follow this tragic story right here in the WBZ newsroom. We'll go back to CBS Network now. We'll update you again in just a short time.
The window. Abraham Lincoln, 1864. Let not him who is houseless pull down the house of another, but let him work diligently and build one for himself, thus by his example, assuring that his own shall be safe from violence when built. Yes, it's a long quote, but something to ponder on this day, when America has much to ponder, including the fact, and it is the fact, that we've been taught since we were school children that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Clearly, our vigilance has not been what it could have, should have been in the days preceding this catastrophe today. And if you think the word catastrophe is an overstatement, then perhaps you want to rethink it. Because many, many people have died on this day. Some at the Pentagon. We hope a few. We don't know how many at the Pentagon when a plane crashed there. But the mayor of New York, police officials, everybody says when the death toll is finally counted from the total collapse of both of these towers of the World Trade Center, there will be a high loss of life. Some people are believed trapped in the remains as we speak, and operations are being mounted to try to get to them. You remember those scenes from Oklahoma City. Remember Oklahoma City, one federal building, terrible as it was, how long it took to get organized, to get those people who were trapped in the remains, as was the case in Oklahoma City. Many heroic deeds this day, most of those deeds we do not yet know, but police, firemen, ordinary citizens have performed their heroic deeds this day, and while many lives have been lost, many lives have been saved. And it's a day that will, as was the case with Pearl Harbor, live in infamy in American history. We go to John Roberts in Washington. John, perhaps bring people up to date on where the president is and where he isn't at this hour.
Well, Dan, as we try to grasp the enormity of this tragedy, and as many times as you see the pictures, they still hit you afresh, an assault against all your senses. It is just impossible to understand the exact magnitude of all of this. The White House is trying to put the pieces back together here so that they can show that they are in control, to show America that they have a leader who is in command here and a person who is going to lead this country against the scourge of terrorism nationwide. Our what's called in-town travel pool was activated just a little while ago, been taken over to what we'll only describe as a government building in downtown Washington, D.C., for fear that people may be watching this broadcast in order to determine where the leaders of government are for a briefing about what the government does next. As best we can ascertain, Dan, the president most recently was at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he made the address that you played the videotape of just a short while ago, and is now somewhere in transit over the United States. whereabouts and destination classified at this point. We understand that the Vice President is still in Washington, D.C., though the congressional leadership has been ferried separately via separate helicopters to a location outside. But Dan, I think, and this has now been corroborated by two different sources now, there is a move by the White House to try to get the President back to the White House today. Dan, you mentioned a couple of hours ago now, at least, that the President want to get back to the White House today as a show of force against these terrorists. I believe that the administration is of the same mind, and they are in negotiations now with the Secret Service to make sure that they can adequately assure the safety of the President so they can get him back to the White House. Speaking against that, Dan, though, might be this idea that when the President on Air Force One left Barksdale Air Force Base, they trimmed down the number of media personnel, the White House press corps, who was following him from about 14 to 5, which may indicate that they were going to a smaller location, Dan. So still the information somewhat up in the air, all of this again classified because they do not want to reveal where the President or the Vice President are at this point, but we should know more very soon. We'll get back to you on that.
Our White House correspondent John Robertson emphasizing that whenever the President of the United States traveled, and he's on Air Force One, he has an incredibly sophisticated communication system aboard that aircraft. And while, as John Roberts mentioned, from all appearances and all reports, Vice President Dick Cheney, a very experienced elected and appointed official, is in charge at the White House itself in a secure position below ground in the White House, we believe. And Condoleezza Rice, head of the National Security Council, while on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour basis, at some point, it appears that they were very much, at least in partial charge. Let no one, no matter how you feel politically, misunderstand. The President of the United States is in charge. He is the Commander-in-Chief. And whatever anybody thinks of him or doesn't think of him in the moment, he's the Commander-in-Chief. He's the leader of the nation. He is in Air Force One. He is in instantaneous communication when he wants to be any place in the world, and there should not be any misunderstanding about that. There'll be plenty of time later in the days and weeks to follow about whether he and his White House operation deported themselves as they could have and should have today. But as of this moment, no one should have any misunderstanding about the President being in charge. And with that in mind, we go to Bob Schieffer in Washington. Bob?
Well, Dan, very much in line with what John Roberts was saying about members of the White House staff wanting to get the president back to Washington because they believe that is a way to show the terrorists that they are not giving in. There is very much that same spirit up at the Capitol at this point. The Capitol Police Chief told us just a while ago that congressional leaders are going to make a decision later today about reopening the Capitol tomorrow because they think that is the way to show that this government is still working. Joe Biden, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, said earlier this afternoon, this Congress ought to be in session. When we're not in session, we're saying to the terrorists that they are winning at this point, and we don't want them to say that. So that is the mood. But of course, as John Roberts also pointed out, there are these tremendous security precautions and considerations that have to be taken at this point. So at this point, all we know is that the Vice President, for example, is in a secure place. That is the only clue that members of his staff will give us as to where he is at this point. He's with his Chief of Staff, Louis Libby. His wife, Lynn Cheney, is also with him. But the White House staff tells us only the Vice President is in a secure place. One other point, intelligence sources at this point have really not given members of Congress a great deal of information. Either they don't know or they're holding back on that. We are told that there will be substantive intelligence briefings for members of the intelligence committees later this afternoon, but at this point about all they know is that these were well-coordinated attacks. Well-coordinated, well-planned out. At this point, it's our understanding that members of Congress have been given no information as to who specifically might be behind these attacks. We should also add, and these intelligence sources pointed out to us, that security forces, American forces around the world, have been on a considerably high state of alert in recent weeks, almost since the bombing of the USS Cole some months ago. Everybody has been expecting something. Nobody really expected anything of this gravity. Certainly nobody expected something as widespread as these attacks were. But that about brings it up to date as far as we can determine at this point, Dave.
Bob Schieffer live in Washington. This is CBS News continuing live coverage of the incredible acts of terrorism that were put forward today. Reporting, I am from CBS News World headquarters in New York, and here's what we know and what we don't know up to this hour. It's been one of the most horrifying attacks ever against the United States on home soil. Terrorists crashed two airliners, separately, not far apart, two hijacked airliners, apparently American Airlines commercial jets, into the World Trade Center. This deadly series of blows brought down the twin 110-story towers. A plane also rammed into the Pentagon as the government itself was brought under attack. Now, we want to show you in sequence what happened this morning at the World Trade Centers. These buildings at the tip of Manhattan. First, an aircraft, and that is the plane, comes in and hits a World Trade Center building. This was the second hit, if you will, I believe. Then after the two planes, one hit one tower, then another hit another tower, you see the plane went deep into the building, and indeed one witness said it almost came out the other side. That was a quote. Then, incredibly, unbelievably, almost inconceivably, one of the huge twin towers began to collapse from the top, quickly cascading down, completely, totally destroyed. A rain of steel and concrete. Other buildings around began to collapse. A horrific sight. And then, as before that could even be absorbed as a fact, the second tower began to collapse. Those events between just before 9 a.m. Eastern Time this morning and around 10 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. And then another plane crashed into a helipad near the Pentagon and put part of the Pentagon in Washington, the U.S. Defense Department headquarters, in flames and filled with smoke. The Defense Department later confirmed there had been some fatalities. They did not say how many, and there were injuries at this place. Then there was a plane crash, apparently, reportedly and supposedly a crashed plane in western Pennsylvania. And Russ Mitchell's been trying to get the facts on that. Russ?
That's right, Dan. United Airlines says Flight 93, which was a Boeing 757, left Newark, New Jersey at 8:01 this morning Eastern Time, was headed for San Francisco with 38 passengers, 2 pilots, and 5 flight attendants. United Airlines has confirmed that plane did crash about 80 miles from Pittsburgh. There are no survivors, according to United, at this time.
Russ Mitchell. And then there is the case of a plane is believed to have crashed in the area of the presidential retreat at Camp David, Maryland, but quite frankly, the facts on that remain in some doubt. Now, we're told that President Bush has just landed at Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska. Remember, the president started the day in Florida. He was on a out-of-Washington trip to Florida. Then he turned up at Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana, made his second statement of the day. Now, we're told Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska. Why would he go there? Well, for one thing, the DEFCOM planes are headquartered at this place in Moffett Air Force Base, we're told, and that is that there are special aircraft which, in case of, say, a nuclear attack or some other national emergency, that the president could could board one of those aircrafts. They have special facilities in case of a national emergency. Now, I want to emphasize the President's been traveling in Air Force One, which has very sophisticated equipment, but is not, in fact, a so-called DEFCON plane. That's special aircraft. We don't know that President Bush is boarding one of these DEFCON planes. We're told what we know, and all we know, is that he went from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport to Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska, and he's now receiving what's called as an up-to-date briefing at the air base in Nebraska. Where he intends to go after this, if anywhere today, is unknown. We'll try to keep you posted as we go along on the President's movements, but a decision was made. He said first, when he was in Florida, he said he was going back to Washington. But a decision was made that he was not going to do that. It was unannounced, as probably should not have been. He wound up in Barksdale Air Force Base, as I say, and now is at Moffett Air Force Base in Nebraska, where it said that he's getting a briefing. Let me pause and say that I've made a mistake here. The responsibility is mine and the blame is mine. It is Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, not Moffett. Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. So the situation at this hour, let's review. The casualties are many. There are many dead, and New York hospitals are overflowing with the wounded from the collapse, the twin collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. There have been some fatalities, the number unknown, at the Pentagon when an aircraft was crashed into the Pentagon. American commercial airlines say that at least 4 planes were hijacked this morning as part of what appears to be a concerted effort at terrorism. American Airlines says 2 of its planes were crashed into the World Trade Center. Now, that would be American Airlines Flight 77, Dulles to Los Angeles, and American Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles. And let me note, asterisks bottom of the page, mentally, if you will, that there's some discrepancy. The eyewitnesses, several eyewitnesses, said they thought that one of the planes that hit one of the World Trade Centers was not a large airliner. Now, a Dulles to Los Angeles flight would figure to be quite a large airliner, and a Boston to Los Angeles flight would figure to be quite a large airliner. We have no explanation for that. A Boeing 757, one of the planes believed to have crashed in the World Trade Center, and a Boeing 767, another plane that believed to have crashed into the other World Trade Center. That'll perhaps be sorted out as time goes along, but American says it believes that it's 2 planes, these 2 planes, crashed into the World Trade Centers. Then United Flight 175, also a Boeing 767, large aircraft, flying Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked in flight. And then United Flight number 93, Newark to San Francisco, another Boeing 757, was hijacked. Those are the 4 planes known to have been hijacked. Bill Richardson, one time, in fact, until fairly recently, head of the Department of Energy in Washington, also once the United States ambassador to the United Nations, very experienced politically, and also someone who's been involved with intelligence information about terrorist networks, is with us in our Washington Bureau. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, Dan.
Try to give us some perspective here, and also let's address the alleged bin Laden connection to all this.
It seems to me, Dan, and I used to every morning get an intelligence briefing that I don't get anymore, but my sense, Dan, is that this was a coordinated attack. It took a lot of resources. It basically points to a sophisticated network that would be bin Laden. I recall when I was UN ambassador trying to get him extradited, going to Afghanistan, and basically getting stiff-armed by the Taliban. Now, I think what is very important here, Dan, is besides dealing with the tragedy, besides supporting the president fully, he is fully in charge, and we should come together as a country. I think it's important that we ensure and take steps right away so that this doesn't happen again. I think we need a massive effort to upgrade our terrorism capability. I think the war is not just a missile war or a military war. We've got terrorism that crosses borders. Secondly, I always sensed that when I was in the government that we had a lot of very good agencies, a lot of good people dealing with terrorism, but somehow we need better coordination. I would put a terrorism SAR. I think also we need a national commission appointed by the president to look at what happened and what steps we need to take, bipartisan, to deal with this massive attack on America. So those are the steps that I think we need to take. Obviously, we need to upgrade our human intelligence, as Senator McCain said, basically spies infiltrating some of these terrorist cells, but also satellites, because this is such a massive attack that I think we needed both more human intelligence, but also more satellite and the kind of sophisticated intelligence that we've been investing so much in.
Mr. Secretary, based on your experience with looking into these kinds of things, and you said you made a trip to Afghanistan trying to get the Taliban government to help with catching Osama bin Laden. After there were attacks on the U.S. embassies in Eastern Africa in 1998, President Clinton authorized 2 sets of missile attacks, cruise missile attacks, one against in Afghanistan, one in the Sudan, in retaliation for what he said were clear indications that Osama bin Laden, and pointed out bin Laden's connections to Sudan and Afghanistan. My point is that after those attacks, bin Laden became even bigger in the minds of those haters of America, particularly those who are of Muslim religion, than he was before. So what I'm grasping for here is some indication of what does a nation such as ours, what are the options for this or any other president when this kind of thing happens? The last time, I say, one of the last times we launched these missile attacks, and frankly, the evidence is that they didn't do much good.
Dan, I think the president has a limited option here, and the option is if we can find bin Laden, locate him, get good enough intelligence, a massive retaliation against them. I think that's called for very clearly if he is the perpetrator. The second thing, Dan, is we need to get the international community, our allies, our friends, developing countries, to recognize that terrorism is a worldwide threat, that this has happened to everybody, so we've got to get more international cooperation, NATO, Asian nations, African nations. And thirdly, there's got to be a response against the countries like Afghanistan that may harbor these terrorists, or certain countries in the Middle East, that if they don't turn them over, and they have them, they can't use legalisms, and that they would also be subject to a very tough response. I think, Dan, with terrorism, you deal with it, needless to say, we need a stronger intelligence capability. We need to be better prepared. But we also have to have an international effort. We can't do it alone. But I think the most important step here, Dan, is we got to rally around the president, rally around as a country. This is an unprecedented attack. We've been violated. But you've got to start planning for the next day to ensure that this never happens again.
Former Secretary of Energy, former Ambassador to the United Nations for the U.S., Richardson, we thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
This is Jack Williams here at the WBZ studios in Boston, and let's talk a little bit about the Boston connection to the absolute tragic attacks today. Joe Lawless, who's at Massport Security, was able to tell us a couple of interesting facts in a news conference a short time ago. 2 flights taking off from Logan Airport this morning were both hijacked. Both of those planes had spent time on the ground, in fact, overnight at Logan Airport. He did not say, but one would have to presume that the hijackers got on those 2 planes here in Boston since they overnighted. Now, Lawless said the 220 aircraft either took off or departed from Logan this morning. 2 are unaccounted for. We now know they are American Airlines flight number 11, taking off at 7:59 this morning with 92 people on board. It had a Boston crew. John Oganowski, the pilot. Second pilot was Tom McGinnis of Stratham, New Hampshire. We also know on board, we've confirmed that one of the co-founders and chief technology officer and board member of the Acme Technology in Cambridge was on the American Airlines flight. Daniel Lewin, 31 years old, survived by a wife and 2 sons. The other flight that took off from Boston this morning that was hijacked was a United Airlines Flight 175. Both of these flights were scheduled to go from Boston nonstop to Los Angeles. On that United Airlines flight, there were 65 people on board. We haven't heard any names yet of the pilots and crew, if there in fact were a Boston-based crew. We just know that they left at 8:14 this morning. Now, that plane went down. We're unable to confirm, and so far, government officials will not confirm where that plane went down. We know that 2 planes did hit those towers. You're seeing pictures in the background, one about 8:45 this morning and the other at 9 o'clock. Families of victims are gathering at Logan Airport. The airport, by the way, has been shut down. Let's go to Casey Kaufman now near the airport. Casey.
All right, Jack, we now have a clearer picture of the events and the enormity of the tragedy, and as it relates to Boston and to Logan Airport. Massport officials just provided us with a snapshot of the morning. They say between 7 and 9 a.m., 220 aircraft movements at Logan, including 106 departures and 114 arrivals were registered. Now, that left 2 unaccounted for, and we now know that those 2 jetliners that were involved in 2 of the deadly crashes today actually originated from Boston. Were registered. Now, that left 2 unaccounted for, and we now know that those 2 jetliners that were involved in 2 of the deadly crashes today actually originated from Boston. They are, as you said, American Airlines Flight number 11 from Boston bound for L.A. It left Logan from Terminal B at 7:59 this morning with 81 passengers and 11 crew members, hijacked in flight and crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers around 9. At 8:14, United Airlines Flight number 175 left Boston with 56 passengers and 9 crew members en route to L.A., also hijacked in flight, and officials now believe, at least according to the Massport officials in their briefing moments ago, that this jetliner was also involved now in the second crash of the World Trade Center tower. Massport, as you mentioned, has opened a family assistance center at the nearby Hilton Hotel to receive family members of the passengers. There are counselors and clergy there as well. There are a number of family members gathered. It is off limits to the media, and if you have a loved one that may be might have been on board one of those 2 Boston flights, you are being asked to call American Airlines. The number is 800-245-0999. United, the airline's number is 800-932-8555, or Massport, and the number is 617-568-3100. Now, Logan remains closed, and Massport has asked passengers and employees to leave the airport. There is a heavy police presence here. My colleague Kathy Curran spoke with folks at Logan just moments after the horrible news came in.
I'm freaked. I'm absolutely astounded. I was just about to start my new job in L.A. today, and all of my friends know I'm on a flight to Los Angeles today. So everybody I know is probably wondering if I'm dead right now.
We heard about this as we were heading here. I don't really know, sir. I have no idea. Why don't you go down there and perhaps he can help you?
There was chaos and panic at the American terminal the moment word of the downed plane spread. Logan quickly shut down and investigators moved in. Craig McFarland was supposed to be on Flight 11 to L.A., one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center.
I don't know what to do. I want to just go see. I want to go watch TV myself, actually, right now.
It's really scary. It's wild. I have no idea what's going on.
There were several flights taxiing on the tarmac at Logan when the 2 planes crashed in New York. The pilots here told passengers what was going on, and those flights were aborted.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's a very scary situation. I mean, it could have been the plane that I was on.
Hours later, the horror devastated workers at United. They lost 56 passengers and their crew. And the fact that this looks like the work of terrorists has travelers wary.
I'm flabbergasted. Like I said, I was in Europe for the summer, and I couldn't wait to get back where I'd be safe, and then this happened.
Now everyone is on alert. Reporting from Logan, Kathy Curran, WBZ 4 News.
So Massport remains closed indefinitely. People are being asked not to come to Logan. Rather, Massport has closed Logan indefinitely. They will be working with the FAA. The FBI is the lead investigator in this case, and Massport has set up a media center here at the Hyatt Hotel. They are required to, under their emergency plan, to brief us. We heard from officials a few moments ago, and we expect to bring you any information as soon as there is a briefing. The Family Assistance Center that was set up at the Hilton Hotel, as I mentioned, is off limits to the media. Family members of loved ones on board the Boston-based jetliners are gathering there along with clergy and counselors, and Massport officials say they will be bringing us information about what is happening from that center when they brief us next. Reporting live from the Hyatt at Logan Airport, I'm Casey Kaufman. Back to you, Jack.
Casey, thank you. Of course, as the days pass, we'll tell a number of stories. Thousands of New Englanders are in the New York area on a daily basis on business. Anyone who's flown the New York shuttle realizes just how busy and how much interaction between the two cities. The Associated Press was quoting one company in Rhode Island had set up a meeting this morning with their people down at the World Trade Center. No word on any possible fatalities there. Reaction from Washington is beginning to come in. We're now hearing from some of our elected officials. We now have some response from the First Lady Laura Bush and from our senior Senator Ted Kennedy.
All of us deplore the acts of terrorism that we have seen in these past minutes, and our hearts reach out to all of those who have suffered, lost their lives, and are injured right now. And all of us reach out as Americans to the brave rescue workers that are attempting to help our fellow citizens. We, out of respect for those efforts, have postponed our hearing this morning. We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in other area of public policy.
Our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now.
Here in Boston, the response today was very fast. Federal employees, state employees were sent home. In all, some 55,000 state employees in Boston are now at home. 1,500 state-owned buildings around the state were locked and secured by extra police today. Logan Airport closed. The Amtrak service has been closed today along the northeast corridor. Well, as you can imagine, people here are talking nothing but this. I think we're all stunned and shocked and just finding out more about the extent of the devastation. Let's go to the Boston City Hall Plaza. Shelley Lockhart has been checking out the situation there. Shelley?
Well, Jack, what would normally be a very busy time down here downtown is now actually quite quiet. Not too many cars on the streets and not a lot of people walking around. City Hall has been evacuated. The State House was evacuated, both of those early this morning, along with many of the buildings here in downtown. Everyone just going home, trying to find a way to somehow comprehend America's loss and to figure out how something like this could have originated in Boston.
It cuts the heart of all of us, and life in America has changed forever.
Mayor Menino voiced what so many hearts are feeling.
So I just ask everyone in our city to step back and say a little prayer for these individuals.
As downtown Boston universities and government buildings evacuated, traffic came to a standstill and the emotional weight set in.
My brother works at World Financial Center, which is connected to that, so we got to try to get in touch with him and see if he's okay and safe.
The city is on high alert. Law enforcement presence is visible on almost every street. Boston Emergency Management has called in extra help.
We're not experiencing any increased demand on our system. We're just building up to have the extra availability out there.
And just about anywhere that you go in downtown Boston this afternoon, you will see police cars, ambulances, fire trucks. As I said, they are on high alert. We also want to let you know that a disaster medicine team from here in Boston has also been called in, and they are on alert just in case they have to go to Washington, D.C. or to New York City to help with some of the casualties there. Reporting live from downtown Boston, I'm Shelley Lockhart, WBZ 4 News. Jack, back to you.
All right, Shelley, thank you very much. Acting Governor Jane Swift has been at the state bunker in Framingham and indicating that she is ready to help New York in any way. We know that some F-15s, members of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, have been sent. They've been patrolling the skies. All air traffic in the United States and Canada has been halted, except for military air traffic right now. It's an unprecedented time in our nation's history, and just an absolute tragedy. We don't know how many people from Boston. I was totaling up the numbers on the two flights which emanated from Boston this morning, both hijacked. That American Airlines and the United Airlines flight, between the two, 157 people were on board, including, at least on the American Airlines flight, the whole crew was from Boston. Let's check the situation in the Back Bay. Christina Hager joins us with a look at what's happening in the Back Bay of Boston. Christina?
Well, Jack, a Boston Globe delivery man just drove by and dropped off this extra edition. You can see it says Reign of Terror. Otherwise, around here in the Back Bay, a situation similar to what Shelley described. Very calm, very somber. Frankly, a lot of people have left. We've been out here talking with people as they decide whether they should leave work and go home. And judging by the lack of traffic out here, it looks like a lot of people have, in fact, decided to go home. Like everywhere else in the country, the people we have talked with today tell us they are in shock, frightened to think what next, especially here in the Back Bay, where there are a lot of high-rises like the Prudential building behind me, the flag here at half staff. The devastation that has happened around the country clearly on the minds of everyone here. Watch this.
Well, it's just very surreal. It's when you see a plane actually hit another building and then you see it explode.
It's crazy. Everything's crazy. You can't do anything about it, but people are sick.
That's terrifying. It really is horrifying to think that, you know, all these planes are going down. I don't know. It's nerve-wracking.
We closed around noontime today out of concern for the safety of our employees and also out of respect for the numerous persons who have been killed by this act of terrorism.
Hundreds of people who work in the Prudential building here asked to leave this morning as a security precaution and also as part of a mass exodus that began with the city's tallest building, the John Hancock, an evacuation there, then an evacuation at the other Hancock buildings. In all, 12,000 people evacuated from all of the Hancock properties, and a lot of other businesses here in the Back Bay area also shutting down. The T is waiving all fees. The Mass Pike is waiving all tolls, all part of an effort to move people out of the city here. And again, it appears, judging by the lack of traffic, pedestrian and road traffic, it looks like people are getting that message. Again, just as I would imagine in other cities across the country, a very quiet and somber mood here in Boston. Live in the Back Bay, Christina Hager, WBZ 4 News. Jack, back to you.
All right, Christina, and I think certainly shock would also be part of it. We now have a picture of the pilot who was piloting the American Airlines flight when it took off from Boston. We don't know if he was at the controls. More than likely not when it crashed in the World Trade Center. This is John Ogonoski. He's from Dracut. He's the father of 3 daughters, ages 11 to 16. His wife also his wife is an American Airlines stewardess, apparently. His brother, Jim, and other members of the family are going to be speaking to the media in a few moments, and we're going to monitor that for you. So we will continue to watch the Boston Connection as we rejoin CBS and see what else is unfolding with the Pentagon on fire, at the World Trade Center, 2 buildings both destroyed, another airline down with loss of life that's uncounted so far, but in the thousands certainly. We'll be back with more updates in just a few moments. Right now, let's rejoin CBS News.
Made a short statement there calling this an apparent terrorist attack. Then he flew to air base in Shreveport, Louisiana, made another videotape statement there, somewhat longer in both statements, assuring Americans that their government was continuing to function and that those responsible for this would be found and be held accountable, and asking for the prayers and thoughts of families most directly affected by today's tragedies. Then the president flew on to Nebraska, to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where he was last reported to be receiving, quote, a briefing on the situation. And at that particular Air Force Base in Nebraska are the DEFCOM planes, which are aircraft outfitted particularly to carry presidents aloft in catastrophic situations. Not to say that President Bush is going to go on a DEFCON plane. So far as we know, he plans to continue to fly on Air Force One. But where he will go, where he will wind up, we do not know. He did not go back to Washington as he said he was going to do out of Florida. More about that as we go later on. Now we're approaching the half-hour mark. Every half hour and hour we try to recapitulate what we know, what we don't know, bring you up to date on the situation, and we do that in a very few moments. But let me point out a couple of things before doing that. First of all, New York hospitals continue to be absolutely inundated with the wounded from today's events in and around the World Trade Center. Some patients have been taken to outlying hospitals, suburban hospitals outside the city. There is a shortage of blood, as you would expect under these circumstances, and the American Red Cross is keeping open the facilities for blood donations in the city, in those areas of the city that are not affected by the explosions and fire and events in Lower Manhattan. So those blood donation centers are open. The FAA says that air traffic, which has been grounded in the country in an unprecedented act since early this morning, that tomorrow noon is the earliest the FAA intends to have air transport authorized again. Overseas flights headed for this country were ordered to either U-turn or to find landing places outside the United States. NATO was holding what was described as an emergency meeting, which was due to begin about a half hour ago. A senior official is expected to brief shortly at FBI headquarters in Washington. We will, of course, be monitoring that, probably carry it live for you. Also at the Pentagon, where there's been very little information about the extent of damage today, understandably little information. The Defense Department wanting to give out as few details as possible, but there has been damage at the Pentagon. There have been some fatalities there. The Defense Department confirmed that several hours ago, and some injured. But we will also be receiving a Pentagon briefing somewhere along the line this afternoon. The pictures you're seeing now on videotape are from the World Trade Center area. Let me point out that it wasn't just the collapse of the twin towers of the World Trade Center, one tower and then the other, where 50,000 people generally work on any given workday and where thousands more generally visit, but there were buildings around the World Trade Center that in the avalanche of debris, the concrete and steel and other materials raining down the whole area, there were other buildings in that section of New York, Lower Manhattan, that collapsed at or about the same time as the World Trade Center. The mayor of New York, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, has said that there's been a, quote, tremendous loss of life. In an interview with CBS News, he wouldn't even speculate as to how much loss of life. There, at last report, there were people known to be still alive in the debris of the World Trade Center collapse. Efforts were being organized to try to get to those people. Now, this is an unprecedented show of terrorist horror, what you're seeing today. The 110-story World Trade Center collapsed in this shower of rubble and dust and destruction after two hijacked airliners, the airliners carrying a lot of people themselves, slammed into the sides of the twin symbols of American capitalism. And Fuad Ajani from Johns Hopkins University pointing out before that the two main targets today, one a symbol of America's economic power, the World Trade Centers, the other the symbol of American military power with the Defense Department. And no one can believe that those two main targets were selected at random. They were selected for their symbolic importance to the nation. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said, and I quote him again, "Now the number of casualties will be more than most of us can bear." Now, this was a systematic terrorist attack that included another hijacked plane crashing into the Pentagon. And we very early on this morning said that this was the Pearl Harbor of terrorism. Then following that, at least one U.S. senator picked up on that theme, comparing this to the incidents of 1941's Japanese Pearl Harbor attack that launched World War II. This day, national security was quickly moved up all around the country. The terrorists directed the two planes into the towers in the middle of the morning rush hour. There was no coincidence at the hour they did it. It was right at the height of the rush hour, right at 9 o'clock. And you say, well, how did this happen? Well, we don't know. But apparently, two planes bound from Boston to Los Angeles were hijacked almost simultaneously. Somebody had to go into the cockpit of the plane. Somebody had to command the plane. And somebody said, in effect, I'm a suicide bomber, an airborne suicide bomber. And they crashed the planes into the World Trade Center. And much the same thing is believed to have happened with the crash into the Pentagon. Now, as for what happened in western Pennsylvania in the Pittsburgh area with the plane crashing there, the details are sketchy. And yes, we did report that the FBI believed that there had been a plane crashed at or near the Camp David presidential retreat in Maryland. But that has remained a vague, unconfirmed story throughout the day. What you're watching on your screen now, debris and people, yes, humans, coming down from the upper stories of the World Trade Center before those World Trade Center towers collapsed. Some of the World Trade Center's 50,000 workers were seen leaping from windows to their certain death. That included, in one case, according to eyewitnesses, that included a man and a woman holding hands as they leaped from the World Trade Center as the flames engulfed their floors. Some people jumped from as high as the 80th floor. This happened as the planes exploded into fireballs. Unimaginable, these things, but part of today's reality. Now, first reports had at least 600 people undergoing treatment at hospitals. Early reports said 150 of those were in critical condition. At least another 1,500 so-called walking wounded were taken to Liberty State Park in New Jersey for treatment. The mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, says it may take 2 days before a final figure of the dead and injured becomes known. No one would be surprised if it didn't take longer than 2 days. Yes, there was a New York mayoral primary vote scheduled today in New York that was canceled. I don't have to repeat, but will, that the financial markets closed immediately. They'll have a conference call tonight to determine whether the financial markets will open tomorrow. Hospital officials have been preparing for the worst all day, and they've gotten the worst. The Bellevue Hospital medical director, Eric Mannheimer, called this, and I quote him, a catastrophe of unparalleled proportions. Now, speculation, and please mark the word, italicize the word speculation about the attack, rather quickly focused on terrorist fugitive Osama bin Laden, who was last reported in Afghanistan. Afghanistan's Taliban government, the radical fundamentalist Islamic government of Afghanistan, moved quickly in a public relations effort, understandable from their point of view, to say two things. One, that they deplored this. Two, that they had nothing to do with it. And three, this would surprise some people, the Taliban spokesman saying that Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with this. Exclamation point, pause. That's what they said. And again, we want to come back to nothing but speculation so far. And we pointed out before, and we will point out again, that there are high-level intelligence people in this country and around the world who believe the United States had made a mistake by always attributing almost every terrorist act to Osama bin Laden. There's a school of thought that says we've built him up much larger than he is. I'm not subscribing or not subscribing to that point of view, simply pointing out that there is a point of view, a belief that among some, that we've made too much of Osama bin Laden. But it's way too early to make any conclusions about that. It's just simply to note that speculation centers around Osama bin Laden, as it has in almost every other case of terrorism over the last 6 to 8 years. Although it's true that a lot of people in the United States never heard of Osama bin Laden before the explosions at the U.S. embassies in Eastern Africa in 1998 and the ensuing cruise missile attacks by the United States directed at targets in Sudan and Afghanistan. Before that, Osama bin Laden, he was known in intelligence circles and certainly known in the Middle East and around Afghanistan, but was not all that well known in the United States.
I'm Jack Williams here in Boston, again with the Boston Connection. On board that American Airlines flight was the pilot when it took off, 52-year-old John Oganowski of Dracut. The family is now talking about him.
Difficult to ad-lib what I want to say today. I'm Jim Oganowski, and as you all are aware of the tragedy that's impacted our country today, it's been reported that my brother John was the captain of American Airlines Flight 11, which was hijacked out of Logan Airport this morning en route to Los Angeles, California. John leaves behind a loving family, his wife, 3 lovely daughters, his parents, brothers and sisters, numerous aunts and uncles, friends, loving community. Our family is obviously grieving, as is the whole nation, for what has happened today. I personally, I think I'm in shock. I'm in some type of denial. I keep looking at the cornfield behind me, hoping that my brother comes walking on out. This tragedy has not only impacted us as a family, but our whole community, and as a nation, our whole country. On a personal side, I ask that I'll come out for this last time, but please respect my parents and the rest of the family's wishes to be alone at this time. I'll give you a little personal on John. He was 52. He was born in Lowell at St. Joe's Hospital. My other brother Joe was born at St. John's Hospital. He went to St. Stanislaus School on High Street in Lowell, and then he attended Keith Academy. And after that, he attended what is now University of Lowell. It was Lowell Tech at the time. He joined ROTC in the late 60s when it was not cool to be in the military. He joined the military right after being commissioned as second lieutenant in the Air Force. He flew in the Air Force on T-37s and T-38s, and he capped his career off on C-141 transports right at the close of the Vietnam era. He then pursued his lifelong dream and left the military, become an airline pilot. In 1979, he was hired by American Airlines. He's flown for them for 22 years. The most recent years as a captain on a 767. John loved to fly, but more importantly, of course, he loved his family. And John's legacy is where we stand today. There's 150 acres of land here that John fought for many years with the town of Dracut and the state. There's 150 acres of land here that are going to remain as we see them today as open space through the mass. There's 150 acres of land here that are going to remain as we see them today as open space through the mass.